Okay, we'll call to order this meeting of the Board of Selectmen for July 21st. And the first item on the agenda is approval of meeting minutes for 3 dates: June 18th, July 1st, and July 7th.
Separately, or?
I'll move approval of June 18th minutes.
Second.
Any changes, discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Move approval of July 1st.
Second.
Any changes on July 1st? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And finally,
Unanimous.
move approval of June 7th, 2014 minutes.
July 7th.
July 7th.
Yep. Second.
Any changes? If not, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye, unanimous. Next item is to confirm our future meeting dates. We're scheduled to meet August 12th and August 19th.
Yep, that's fine with me.
Those dates still good?
Yep.
Everyone? Okay. Next item, payroll and vendor warrants.
I'll move approval of the current payroll and vendor warrants.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, unanimous. Citizen speak. Do we have anyone who would like to address the board tonight during citizen speak? Yes, Vicki.
Vicki?
Hi, how are you?
Very good.
I'm here tonight because I want
Could you
to...
just for the name,
Oh,
I already said
sure.
your name, but just for the record, your name and
Sure.
address, Vicki.
Sure, Vicki McCarthy, 6 Hillcrest Road.
Thank you.
And I'm here tonight to thank you all for signing the letter of appreciation for Father Mark Murphy. I thought that was wonderful, and I wasn't able to hand deliver it in person, but I brought it to his new assignment. And now he's the chaplain for the undergraduates at Harvard University, and he's stationed at St. Paul Church in Cambridge. And the business manager there, when I said that I was bringing this from the town of Milton, he said, well, could you send some of your boys to the choir school, because that's where the Archdiocesan Choir School is. So, and I guess some of our students have graduated from there.
Wonderful.
And I'd particularly like to thank Paula, because she helped me craft the letter, and I was so delighted when you had signed it and sent it on to him. So thank you very much, because as I mentioned in some of my reports, I was hoping he could come here to meet you, because he was a fabulous role model, and the kids are really going to miss him. So thank you very much for that.
Thanks, Vicki.
Thanks, you're welcome.
Father Murphy will be very missed, I know, by his former parish at St. Agatha's and throughout Milton. Anyone else for citizen speak tonight? Okay, then if not, our next item is a public meeting with the Housing Authority. Do we have all of the members of the Housing Authority here?
No, you're missing one.
Okay, we can, it's a roll call vote, so we probably should wait. Is the person coming?
Okay, yeah, you can wait.
Do you want to wait just a few more minutes? We'll take something else on the agenda.
You can do something else if you'd like to, Kate, and then come back to it
Okay.
if you want to. I mean, nobody
Well,
Would the library be better?
yeah, why don't we go, we'll move on to the Milton Reeds Committee, and then we'll go back and see whether the Housing Authority is ready. So the Milton Reeds Committee. Good evening.
Hi, everybody. Annie Davis, Avalon Road, Precinct 2 Town Meeting member, and a friend of the Milton Library.
Will Adamczyk, the library director.
Great, good evening. Thank you for both for coming in.
Thank you for having us. The game's afoot. Everybody knows that Sherlock Holmes was the original crime scene investigator and is still the world's greatest sleuth. This year, The Adventures of Sherlock Holmes is our selection for Milton Reads, the townwide reading program where we read it this summer and celebrate it in the fall. Maybe it's been a while since you've all read Sherlock Holmes, but trust me, he's as exciting and vibrant as ever. So we've brought you a copy.
Thank you.
This is The Speckled Band. It was the author's favorite story of all of his stories that he wrote, and believe me, it's terrific. It's a classic. These are being given out for free at the library, sponsored by the Friends of the Milton Library.
So people can pick up copies of the book, of the story at the library. They can pick up copies of the adventures. We have all of Arthur Conan Doyle's other Sherlock Holmes books available at the library. But this year, Milton Reads isn't just about the reading of Sherlock Holmes, it's about the whole Sherlock experience. We're going to try to immerse Milton and ourselves in films. Tomorrow we have a movie marathon of all different Sherlock films. It's the first of 2 movie marathons we're doing this summer, so as the temperature gets back up tomorrow, come hide out in the library and watch some films with us. We'll also pretend we are Sherlock Holmes. We're going to have a life-size clue game at the library where we can try to solve our own mystery. If we don't want to be Sherlock Holmes, we could watch someone else be Sherlock Holmes. We're going to have a performance by the Milton Players as part of Milton Reads this year, where they'll be doing an interpretation of the Speckled Band, which is the story we're giving out. And then we'll also have a modern-day Sherlock Holmes. We're going to have an expert, a CSI expert, come to the library and talk about how we've gone from intuition in the 1800s to modern-day CSI techniques. So those are some of the ways we're going to be immersed in Sherlock this year.
And of course, Milton Reads is a collaboration between the Milton Public Library and the Friends of the Milton Library. This fall, every 10th grader in the Milton Public Schools will be reading the Speckled Band. And so stay tuned. We hope you can give us your support. There will be postings at the library website and the Friends of the Milton Library Facebook page. We'd appreciate your support and enjoy reading.
Great.
Thank you.
Sounds
Thank
like
you.
a great
Sounds like a
summer event for
fun
a lot of
event,
people to
yes.
take part in.
Great.
Thank you for giving us copies.
Thank you.
Was this given to Mary Gormley to put on her
Yes.
school
Yes.
website?
Yeah.
Good.
Thank you.
Okay,
Great.
thank you
Thanks.
both.
Thank
you.
for coming in. Okay, then the next item on our agenda is a meeting with Caroline Kinsella, the director, the public health director. And Caroline, we have a few topics to go over with you tonight, so why don't we'll go on to that and we'll come back to the Housing Authority.
Caroline?
Good evening, Caroline. Thanks for coming in.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. So I'd first like to go over the Logan Airport Health Study. The results were recently released. The legislature in 2000 mandated that the Director of Environmental Health conduct a health study to encompass a 5-mile radius around Logan Airport, which contains 17 communities. The study was the first of its kind and most complex in the United States. It cost over $2 million and was funded and defunded numerous times over the years. The study involved gathering health information from 6,000 adults who supplied the health information for 2,200 children via phone interviews and questionnaires. The researchers used an air dispersion model, AirMod, and extensive statistical analysis to focus on 5 primary air pollutants: carbon monoxide, volatile organic compounds, nitrous oxide, sulfur oxide, and fine particulate matter. The information was collected to determine what health effects, if any, contributed to 4 specific conditions: asthma, chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, cardiovascular, and auditory. Milton touches the 5-mile radius at the tip of the Neponset, and it was classified as a low exposure area at the time. So they had, if you want to get more information about it, you can go to mass.gov. It's over 100-page report on this study. At the time, and it's almost 10 years old now, Milton was in the low exposure area.
And this was done by the State Department of Public Health. Is that right? Yeah.
The study was actually performed 10 years ago, or?
It started in 2000, but a lot of the data was collected in 2005, 2006.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. But if you want to get more information, it's on mass.gov.
Okay.
Just put in Logan Airport Health Study.
So if it was a low risk at that particular, in your opinion, do you think it's higher now, or do you think it's the same?
Well, I think there's a lot more airport traffic over Milton.
A lot of traffic, yeah.
And so I think a lot of things have changed in 10 years, yes. The Board of Health also voted to approve the following 10 people to the Airplane Noise Advisory Committee: Dennis Cohane, Secretary of the Board of Selectmen; Roxanne Musto, Chair of the Board of Health; Michael Blanchard, Assistant Town Administrator; Caroline Kinsella, Health Director. Chris Zambuto, Milton's representative on the Logan Airport Community Advisory Committee. David Godine, alternative representative on the Logan Airport Community Advisory Committee. Dr. Anthony Compagnano, the health advisor to the Board of Health. And some residents, Wilford Hines, Muna Killingback, and Daryl Warner.
Okay, and that's 10 people. So this would be, we've talked a little bit about this before, and actually before our board acts on this, just for the record, I have a disclosure on file with the town clerk's office because I happen to work in a law firm that has a few hundred attorneys, and when that happens, occasionally someone in an office somewhere has done something for a party that may be here on a completely different matter with us. So our firm has done some bond counsel work, and it's actually a very narrow aspect of just more disclosure counsel work for Massport, but I do have a filing with the town clerk just disclosing that it's not an actual conflict. It could just potentially create an appearance of a conflict. And to dispel that, I'm putting that on the record and have already done so with the town clerk. But our committee, our board is also going to be jointly appointing this committee. The Board of Health has already voted, so we're being asked to vote on this tonight. We have a draft charge. Has the Board of Health already approved the charge to the committee?
What does that mean, the charge to the committee?
The description of what the, of what the committee's
Charge.
I
responsibilities
believe so,
would be.
yeah, we did look at that, yes.
And we've talked about, there's 10 people here on the committee. We've talked about appointing an 11th in
Yes.
order to have an odd number of people for a committee so that there not be a tie vote at some point if there were to be a vote. However unlikely it may be that something might be 5-5, but most committees have an odd number of members. So we're looking at appointing an 11th member at a later meeting.
Sounds good.
So we have a draft motion in front of us tonight, and we have the draft charge.
Okay, you want me to read the charge also, or?
Sure.
Okay, the charge first is to seek solutions that will minimize or alleviate the hazards of noise, air pollution, and the low elevation of aircraft flying over the town, to work in collaboration with the Logan Airport Community Advisory Committee, Inc., Massport, and the Federal Aviation Administration, to work with the town's representatives at the federal and state levels of government, to educate residents about the committee's efforts and the potential health risks of airplane noise and pollution in general, and to report its progress to the Board of Selectmen and the Board of Health at least twice per year. So with that, I will move to appoint the following people to the Airplane Noise Advisory Committee. Selectman Dennis F. Cohane, Assistant Town Administrator Michael Blanchard, Board of Health Chair Roxanne Musto, Healthcare Director Caroline Kinsella, Massport Citizen Advisory Committee member Christopher Zambuto, Massport Citizen Advisory Committee alternate David Godine, resident Dr. Anthony Compagnoni, okay, resident Wilfred Hines, Hines, okay, and resident Daryl Warner and Mara Killenbeck.
I'll second the motion.
Okay, any discussion?
Well, I'm looking forward to playing a part of this. I actually texted Anne-Marie yesterday. I was at a party in East Milton on Wood Street. There's a Wood Road
Wood Street.
out on the backyard. And where we live, Tom, we really don't see any airplanes off of Brush Hill Road there. But I couldn't believe that the planes were coming in so low every 25 to 30 seconds. It was crazy. So I can't wait to get to work on this.
Yeah, it seems to be a growing problem. A lot more people have been reaching out to us to raise these issues. So
We had 25 people at Citizen Speak for the Board of Health. So absolutely, it's a big concern in the town.
Mm-hmm.
People from all over the town came, yes.
and I think we have a good diverse group here of people
think
who
so.
have some official connection with this role, as well as some interested residents. And we have a grassroots group, we all know, that has done an awful lot of research and a lot of work preliminarily, and I think that group is going to continue its efforts as well. So, and there can always be communication between the grassroots group and the town committee. You seconded that, Dennis?
Yeah,
Okay.
and that's a good point you made there. We will be touching to the grassroots committee as well for statistics, and they did an amount of work
That's right.
behind the scenes, and they ought to be complimented too.
Mhm.
Yeah, I agree. And thanks for being willing to be our representative on this, Dennis. This
Welcome.
is an important committee. A lot of people are concerned about this issue. Do we have any other discussion on this? And if not, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye, unanimous. And then Caroline, I think you wanted to also give us some comments about a substance abuse prevention coalition with Vicki McCarthy. Good evening again, Vicki.
Good evening.
So the Norfolk County District Attorney's Office has been reaching out to communities to start forming and organizing substance abuse prevention coalitions. One of our first goals is to bring key stakeholders in the community together to formulate a strategic prevention framework, and I've already reached out to the police, the fire, council on aging, and the schools, and it's been received very positively to start this coalition. Vicki McCarthy, our youth counselor emeritus, and I have applied for a $1,500 mini grant to start this coalition, and we've received approval for the funds to be dispersed. So we've received it from the Blue Hills Community Health Alliance. It's called China 20, and the grant funds will be used for outreach, marketing, and community action efforts. We'll also receive 15 hours of technical assistance. We hope to start the coalition in the fall. Anything you want to add, Vicki?
Well, I did go to a regional meeting with the district attorney, and the town of Avon has been offered to us and to the town of Cohasset, because they're starting a coalition as well, as our mentor. So we have a young woman that's been working in the town of Avon for a couple of years and is very pleased with what's gone on, so she's willing to help us, so I think that's great. And Mr. Hurley, as you know, Weymouth has been a leader for us, and this is a wonderful follow-up to our planning grant that we had a few years ago on healthy communities. We didn't have the capacity to go ahead and do a implementation grant, but Weymouth did, and so they've been kind of our mentors, and I've been keeping in touch with them on a regular basis, and I've been invited to their annual picnic next month at Webb State Park, and it's they have a strong coalition, and so we can learn a lot from them, which will be great.
Yeah.
And now with Avon's help, I think that will be very nice. And of course, Quincy has been a wonderful partner for us for a number of years, and Bill Spinks, a gentleman here in town, has been the prevention coordinator for Bay State Community Services, and they're the lead agency for Impact Quincy, which has done so much work in the drug and alcohol field. So I think we're in pretty good shape. And I was at Milton Hospital the other night, and the gentleman that's the, I think he's come before this board, Robert McChrystal, the new, he has a fancy title, but it's really Jason Buffard's replacement, but in a different, somewhat of a different capacity. But he's very pleased to join on to the coalition, so it's nice to have the hospital, of course. And actually, substance abuse is one of their community benefit goals, so it really fits right into that. So.
May,
Yes.
Madam Chairperson, was this initiated, Vicki, because of an increase in substance abuse, or just the district attorney's office being proactive?
Well, actually, it's probably a combination of both, but it's certainly, you know, to give the DA credit, you know, he got right out there, and the Blue Hills Community Health Alliance as well. And they have decided, the reason we're getting this mini grant is they've decided to give these mini grants to towns that don't have a coalition, because it's important that people work together. And we've had coalitions in the past, but sustainability is hard, because many times people are interested, especially when their kids are in school, and then as, you know, families move on, the coalitions many times fall apart if you don't have some way of keeping it together. So, and of course, as you've heard in the news, unfortunately, Norfolk County has had quite a spike in opiate problems. So, you know, it is responding to a real crisis. I mean, even the governor has come out to say that, you know, there's a crisis in the Commonwealth, and he's actually put some money into different initiatives. I don't know too much of the details on that, but I'm sure we will, because of course, the Blue Hills Community Health Alliance is really, it's kind of the community part of the Department of Public Health, again, a state agency. So I think, you know, it's again the county, the state, and local municipalities that are banding together again to see what we can do and learn from each other and work together.
So is this something you think you'll be coming back in periodically to report on and give us an update from
Yes.
time to time?
Yeah, in the fall, we're going to be starting it, and, yeah, we'll definitely give an update.
We did go before the Health and Wellness Subcommittee of the School Committee, and the young man who actually was the Weymouth intern last year, he now works for the DA's office, and he's kind of the point person for these coalitions. And he came to the Health and Wellness Subcommittee, and then a local resident happens to be the person that's going to be our technical assistant.
Deborah Milbauer. Yeah.
Deborah Milbauer. And so she came to that meeting also, just to let the committee know what she's done in other communities, and now she feels, well, this is my community and this is my expertise. So, and she's a town meeting member as well.
Good. Well, thanks for that update.
Fantastic.
Thanks very much.
Sure.
Will you accept the grant?
Oh, that's right. We
Yes,
have,
do we need an official vote? We don't have a,
Do we need official vote? I don't know.
we
I don't have it. We have to
you
just
get
sign it. Yes,
approved.
to get it approved.
is there a name for the grant that we can just make a motion quickly?
The Milton Substance Abuse Prevention Coalition Grant.
Okay, I'll move to approve and accept the
Is it grant
Grant.
for-
Milton Substance Abuse Prevention Coalition grant.
$1,500.
$1,500.
Second that motion.
Any discussion? And all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Okay,
Thanks
thank
again.
you.
Thanks,
We'll get the paperwork back to you after the meeting tomorrow.
Beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Senator Joyce is here, and this is a very busy time of year at the State House, so I'd like to go to Senator Joyce next, and then we'll go right to the Housing Authority right afterwards if our person is there. Good evening, Brian.
Hello.
Thanks for coming in tonight.
Yes, Madam Chair, I had asked that Brian Joyce come to our selectmen meeting this evening to let us know the happenings up on the, at the State House, and in addition to that, to speak a little bit about the grant that you signed about 2 weeks ago for the project down on Blue Hills Parkway, the remainder of the Blue Hills Parkway project down to the Mattapan entrance. The Senator was instrumental in bringing that team together to make that project come to fruition, so I wanted him to be here to speak to it.
Thank you. Anne Marie wanted me to get credit, which was very nice of her. Credit. Sometimes the big ship of government turns slowly, and I've been working on improvements to Blue Hills Parkway for, it seems like, a dozen years or so. But I'm happy at her request to give just a brief update on what's going on at the State House, how it impacts Milton, and talk about some local issues that may be of mutual importance and interest.
And Brian, could I just interrupt you for a minute, just to, on behalf of the board, to thank you for your efforts regarding the Henry's building. We are going to be discussing that later on this evening, but
Oh, terrific.
you were very instrumental in getting the special legislation filed last week. We'll give an update with more details later, but
Well,
so I want to
thank
thank
you.
you for
And
putting
I'm
the
hap-
idea on the table and for, I guess the word is shepherding it through a little bit so far to this point.
Sure, and I'm happy to talk a little bit about that to the extent you're interested in doing so, but thank you for that. So, good news is the economy is improving. The unemployment rate in Massachusetts now is 5.5%. It's the lowest it's been in 6 years. We added 10,300 jobs in May and 3,700 jobs in June. So it's finally good news. Most of the growth, we've had about 20,000 jobs added in the healthcare and education sectors. We did just pass an economic development bill. As Tip O'Neill said, the three most important things about politics are jobs, jobs, and jobs. And so we recognize there's still people that are underemployed, unemployed, and that it's still our primary responsibility to try to do what we can to spur the economy, both statewide and here locally. One of the legislation I've worked on for over 3 years. We just passed it in the Senate. I'm cautiously optimistic it'll pass the House prior to the end of this legislative session, is so-called PACE legislation, Property Assessed Clean Energy. It's a clean jobs bill that I've worked with various stakeholders, municipal officials, with environmentalists, with financial experts, J.P. Morgan Chase. We've had the former Secretary of Environmental Affairs under Governor Romney, Doug Foy. And we've worked on this now for about 3.5 years, and essentially the town of Milton will have an opportunity to adopt this enabling legislation whereby commercial and industrial property owners would have an opportunity to do deep energy retrofits of their properties through a bond offering from Mass Development that would cost the taxpayers nothing. But the payments for those bonds, after being underwritten by Mass Development with some input from our energy department, would be paid for by the savings. So what happens now in a building like this, you have ESCOs, these large energy savings companies, often Honeywell, Johnson Controls, Ameresco, Siemens, that come in. They have the financial wherewithal to do a deep energy retrofit, not just the light bulbs, but the boilers, projects from $150,000 to $5 million, and to carry on their balance sheet the 30% savings that they've guaranteed. This legislation will unlock this opportunity for small to medium-sized business owners throughout the state. We think will reduce the carbon footprint, carbon emissions, and is estimated to create in excess of 10,000 jobs. And the jobs that have a multiplier effect because it can't be outsourced to China. It's your local tradesperson who then supports local businesses, and the property owner has additional money freed up from their energy savings to create more jobs. So that's something that I was working on with respect to this economic development bill that was just passed, and I'm happy to say that was included. In the state budget, we did modestly increase local aid statewide. We're getting back to where we were. We increased school funding by $100 million, made a significant investment both in early education and also in special education, but areas that heretofore had not gotten enough attention, in my opinion. We made a serious investment in what's become a mental health crisis in the state, and also pay attention for the first time in a very significant way to this opiate addiction. We've been reading about it in the Milton Times and reading about it in the Patriot Ledger. It affects all families, all communities, and we took some very positive steps in this budget. Locally, we have some money for the Trailside Museum. I put a $300,000 item in, which is new money for the town to help offset the extraordinary expenses of firefighter Antonio Pickens's medical expenses. This is the second time that we've done that. The governor vetoed it. I expect we're going to override that veto. Did put money in for the Blue Hills ski area for the Trailside I mentioned, for the Blue Hills Observatory, some money for the Milton Hospital, Beth Israel Milton Hospital, for a geriatric program that we've been funding for a number of years. So there's a number of local items. It also this year gave me an opportunity, in addition to the Blue Hills Parkway, to bring, one of my primary responsibilities is to bring as many tax dollars back to the town as possible. I chair the bonding committee, which is all of the state's long-term spending, and essentially it comes up every 5 years. This happened to be the year, and I had an excess of $23 billion in capital spending authorizations come through my committee, and I think Milton fared very well. We have an environmental bond bill that passed just recently. Now we have to work out the differences with the House. I'm chairing the conference committee that will work out those differences, and I'll be sure to be mindful of Milton's concerns. Some of the things that I put in there were $7.5 million toward the creation of a new park on Truman Parkway, right at Brush Hill Road. There's an area, there's been some discussion through the years, a developer wanted to develop, but I think the land is difficult for the developer to develop, quite honestly. But it raised the issue of what's the highest and best use of this area, and there are some PCBs, some contaminants that are behind the, I think it's called the Hollingsworth-Tileston Dam, and we put $7.5 million in there to clean up those PCBs, direct the Division of Conservation and Recreation to work with the Attorney Generals to bring the responsible parties to bear. I mean, we have now the technological ability to identify where those contaminants came from upstream, go after them for reimbursement, but meanwhile clean it up and create I'm hopeful, a nice new park for the town of Milton with passive recreation, maybe a canoe launch, tie into the multi-use trail along the Neponset that now stretches from Pope John Paul II Park and will go all the way out to Great Blue Hills.
Would that include removing the falls?
Dam itself?
That is also, it's not in that $7.5 million authorization, but that is something that environmentalists have wanted. In fact, I attended a ribbon cutting several years ago when people were very excited about the one at Baker Chocolate coming down, and it's still there. Part of the reason this dam hasn't been removed is because of those contaminants.
Right.
They want to remove them first. So this will be the first step, but yes, I think ultimately we'll see both those dams removed.
Yeah, I think with them down, the use of that waterway for kayaking
Exactly.
and canoeing would be great.
We've already done, there's been about $15 million worth of cleanup done upstream where Mother Brook comes into the Neponset.
Paul's Bridge? By Paul's Bridge?
A little bit past that, yes. We also had $10 million for improvements to Brush Hill Road and Truman Parkway. Much of this is, in the environmental Vaughn bill, is focused on DCR property, so it's all kind of in one area, because that's where the old MDC property is. $2.5 million for capital improvements at Trailside, another $1 million for the Blue Hill Ski Area, $2.5 million for the Blue Hills Weather Observatory. We included some money for improvements to Paul's Bridge, actually, about $1 million that's been asked for by the neighbors, by the folks up at Fuller Village. And the governor, in his environmental bond bill, is suggesting creation of signature parks in urban areas throughout the state. We changed that to be urban and suburban and suggest that one of those signature parks should be Kelly Field, the town field here in Milton. In the general government bond bill, we had money for improvements to the park, improvements to the stables. I hear from Alex Whiteside a lot about those stables up on Hillside Street, and for further improvements to the ball fields up at Houghton's Pond that the kids of Milton use. And finally, in the transportation bond bill, we included a lot of funding for Milton. We see mercifully and finally the work going on at Central Avenue. Thank God that
Most of the potholes are gone.
it was like driving on the surface of the moon for a while there, but now I think it's going to be just absolutely beautiful. The design and properly, I think Joe Lynch and his team did the infrastructure underneath first, the water and sewer pipes, etc. We also have, I put $10 million in for reconstructing Granite Avenue from East Milton Square to the City of Boston line. You know, I mentioned to Frank that one of the neighbors had depicted that strip as like a airplane, you know, runway, and I'd much rather see it more of a boulevard. I think the neighbors would as well, so we envision significant improvements there. We have a number of other items. One of the things that I included in this bond bill is something that, you know, we had a lot of high-tech stuff. We have a lot of water technology is becoming actually pretty important space in it for our economy. But getting away from the high-tech, one thing that, and I'd like to see my partners in local government consider this as well, is increased tree plantings. You know, it's not exactly high-tech, but it is environmental. And in fact, folks tell us if your property is in the shade, Paul is looking at me quizzically, you could save as much as 30% on your energy cost. And one of the things I've noticed the town has, and all towns, really haven't had the money left to invest in trees that are dying a lot with the gas leaks. I put $50 million in this environmental bond bill for tree plantings throughout the state. I would politely urge you to consider in your next warrant that you include, you know, $10,000 for tree plantings, as we always used to. The relief grant from the state is gone, but there is another grant program whereby you can get reimbursed for those trees. So in what Anne Marie wanted to talk about was that Blue Hills Parkway. We have about $10 million going towards improvements there. and they've already resurfaced. In fact, virtually all the state roads in Milton now have just been recently resurfaced, including a bicycle path. I think the Bike Milton group is very happy. We're working now with Beta Engineering and Mass Highway and DCR and the City of Boston. The improvements that have been made so far, we had, a few years ago, I got NSTAR to pay for the traffic lights down at the Yulin Rink at Unquity Road as part of a mitigation for a project they were doing up on Blue Hill Ave. Then the plan was to start at the Boston end, and right at that time, a child got struck crossing the parkway to get to Tucker School. So we moved it up, and we did that work up by Milton Food Mart. Now we're going to go back to the entrance to the town, and I think you'll see some significant safety improvements, those folks turning out of Elliott Street and heading up to Blue Hill Ave. So we're working on both ends of the town, at the Parkway and at Granite Avenue, hopefully, and in between. Finally, with respect to Hendry's, I really do appreciate each of the selectmen and the town administrators' involvement, and I'm happy to participate along with Alex Whiteside, who has done yeoman's work and really has impressed me with his work, as each of you have, to come to a resolution that is in the town's best interest. And I do believe a resolution is very close at hand, one that the neighbors will support, one that is in the greatest interest for the town, and frankly, I think one that will be in the developer's interest. And I think it will ultimately be a win for all parties if we can just get there. And I'm hopeful that we'll get there soon, and that will continue that whole revitalization of the Central Avenue, Milton Village business district, where now the state is putting in $1/3 million in. The idea is to spur private investment, and this is just a perfect example. The redevelopment of the Hendry site is exactly what we were trying to do, and we're hopeful that this mixed-use project will go forward and that all parties will, the enemy of perfect, is better, right? We can never get to, or the enemy of perfect is better, I guess. We might not come up with the perfect proposal, but it's going to be darn close after all this effort. So
You're right, though. It is the last key piece to that whole area that looks great now, other than that one.
how wonderful is, Steel and Rye on one end of town, Abbey Park on the other end of town. I mean, just has added to our, just our culture, our community, and we have an opportunity for a mixed-use development there that could just add further taxes, and I'm very, very hopeful we get there. And if this special legislation helps us get there, that'll be terrific.
Thank you for all of your leadership on this, Brian, and for getting the idea on the table and helping us push it through at the state level. So
I did have one question, Brian. The improvements to the lower end of Blue Hill Parkway that we were talking about, do they do anything with that rotary, the dead man's?
Yeah, I take that road every day, and if you come out of Elliott Street and you take a right and then try to take a quick U-turn to get onto the Parkway to go up to Blue Hill Ave or go to Brush Hill Road.
Scary.
Because you have cars coming down Blue Hill Avenue essentially on two wheels as they're taking the corner at the same time. I actually asked my children not to go that way, but to go up one of the side streets and come around. That's a main part of what we're looking to do.
Right.
And, I've asked, I know that there's a lot of stakeholders. There's the City of Boston, because we want to sync with their lights in Mattapan, the DCR, Mass Highway, the town of Milton, and also the neighbors. So we want to do something that we think this is going to take much of the traffic off Elliott Street. We think there's going to be a very nice improvement for those folks that live on that end of Elliott Street. But it'll be a safety and aesthetic improvement, and it'll also incorporate the bike path, the multi-use trail that's coming from Central Avenue. Now, it stops essentially at Central Avenue. Okay. And, I brokered a peace accord with my friends and neighbors over in the Capon Street area so that it's not going to adversely impact that neighborhood. where it was going to be very close to the house. Now the state has agreed to cross over onto the Boston side of the river at Ryan Playground to come up, essentially River Street to the train station at Mattapian. But then they didn't know how to, cross the street. And so as part of this project, there'll be a bicycle crossing as well. And I think people are going to be delighted about that.
Very good. Very good.
When I drive home on the Parkway, if there's a tree missing, I call DCR. So I watch the town, particularly the state property, very, very carefully. So.
Brian,
A lot of good news for Milton tonight, so thank you for all of your efforts.
Was this your only year as the chairman of the bonding committee?
No, I've had it for
Is this your
probably
last year?
4 years. Well, we do have a new Senate president coming in January. My very close friend and a longtime colleague, Senator Stan Rosenberg from Amherst. So we'll see what assignment I have next year. I have a couple of other responsibilities as well. I'm vice chair of the financial services. I'm also vice chair of the healthcare financing, and I sit on Ways and Means. But everything changes every January. It just so happens I've kept this assignment for about 4+ years, and my guess is I'll move on to something else next year. But this was the good year to have that assignment and to look out for the interests of the communities I serve.
That's my point, yeah. So
Much
thank you.
appreciated, really.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks very
Take care,
much,
Brian.
Brian. Thanks for all that good news. Okay, the Housing Authority, thank
And I
you
do
all.
have to recuse myself.
Okay.
Milton Housing Authority is a client, so.
You want to,
Tom?
come here, come on. Well, I'll sit up here together.
We have a quorum present for the Housing Authority?
Yes,
Okay, great.
correct. I also
Thank you all
have
for
a-
waiting.
I have a letter also about our meeting that I gave to Paula, that we did vote to do what we're doing tonight. I don't know where Lee is. I can't get her. She's not answering her cell phone.
Okay.
That's all, okay? So
Okay.
we have our assistant, Joseph Murphy, who is the chairman of the Milton Housing Authority, our assistant treasurer, June Elam Moores, and Joseph Duffy, who is the vice chairman of the Milton Housing Authority.
Welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining us tonight, and thank you for waiting.
That's fine. No, I'm embarrassed because I did think that we were going to have 4 of us here, but that's what happens.
As long as we have a quorum, that's what counts.
That's right. We have a quorum, and so that is, and our wish at our meeting was that we would appoint Philip Driscoll to this open position.
Philip, do you want to come up and, we have an empty seat up here
Yeah.
if you want to take Tom's chair up here.
Up, yeah.
Come up here, Philip. Yeah, you can sit, sure. We'll all get all 3 together here. Yeah, there we go. Okay.
Okay, Anne Marie has just passed me your letter. So, and obviously, we're here tonight to vote on Philip's appointment to replace Catherine
Catherine
Shea,
Shea.
who has stepped down.
And I'm hoping that not to take anything away from Philip, but I'm hoping that something will get in the newspapers about Catherine, too, who was on this board for 26 years, and since 1988, that's all.
How many years left on this appointment?
And this is only till next April to the
Next
election.
April. Oh.
An election, and then I believe Kathy will have, I believe there's 3 years left in her term. So in April, whoever gets elected in April will get a 3-year term, and then it'll go back to being a 5-year after
Okay,
that.
I see.
That's all. But that's how this works. That's all, okay?
26 years is a long time to
20
serve as a volunteer board member. So if she's watching, Catherine Shea, thank you very much for all of your service.
She probably is not, because she probably can't get this down in Rhode Island, where she is in the process of, I think she's out of Milton. Her house has been sold in Milton.
Oh, I see.
So that's why she resigned from the board, okay? If you want to know my opinion, I was appointed myself, but my opinion would have been that I would have said to Kathy, why don't you come once in a while, whatever, stay till next April. We won't have any upset over an appointment that some people feel is a leg up or whatever it is, even though it isn't. People think that. But unfortunately, since she moved out of town, it's just not, she's in Rhode Island, so it's just not going to happen. So that's why she resigned as of, I believe it was the 30th of June, and we have to fill this within 30 days. So that's what,
Well, why don't we get her address so we can send her a letter thanking her for 26 years of service is a long time, so.
yes, it is, correct, yep.
And you have a great new candidate to replace
Great new
Catherine and Philip
Fellow
Driscoll.
who, I'll tell you this, I came up here to talk to another candidate, and the word got out, and I got home, and I got a phone call from Philip saying, gee, I'd like to have that position if it's open. So, and I think certainly an awful lot of senior citizens in this town have a good word for Philip, so
Yes.
hopefully our senior people will feel the same way. So,
Probably every senior citizen in town knows Philip. For
Yes,
all his
correct.
work at the Council on
But
Aging.
he's the former mayor of Milton, too.
Yeah.
That's right,
correct.
that's right.
you're right, exactly, so,
Former Mayor of Milton is joining the Housing Authority.
right, yeah.
So Katie, do you want me to make a motion, or since it's a public hearing, do you have to do something else?
Well, I think we're told we both have to do a roll call vote. Now, you said you've already voted this.
We have voted it
But,
at the meeting, but we can vote here,
Voted,
too.
Vote
yes.
again.
Whatever you'd like to do. We have to both, okay.
Okay.
So do I make the motion and we both vote, or?
I think the boards vote separately, so you've already voted. Why don't we have our board vote, and then if you want to take another vote?
Sure.
If that's agreeable to the Housing
It's
Authority?
fine.
Okay.
Yep, yep.
So I'll make a motion to appoint Philip Driscoll of 967 Canton Avenue to the Milton Housing Authority to serve until 2015 town election, to fill the vacancy created by resignation of Catherine Shea.
And I'll second the motion. Any discussion? And if not, we need a roll call vote, so Dennis
Yes.
and myself, yes.
Okay, then you want,
If you'd like to vote it again,
You
is that
can
a
read the same
requirement?
motion there if you'd like.
okay. The motion is to appoint Philip Driscoll of 967 Canton Avenue to the Milton Housing Authority to serve until the 2015 town election to fill the vacancy created by the resignation of Catherine Shea. So I make the motion.
You need a second.
Okay.
And then a roll call.
Okay, and a roll call. Joseph Murphy, I vote for Philip. Aye. Okay, so the three of us voted for Philip, okay?
Congratulations, Philip.
Congratulations.
Thanks
Well
for
done.
taking this on.
Okay, so that's,
Before you leave,
Yeah.
I don't want to interrupt you if you had something else to say, Joseph.
no, I was going to say, I think if you want to talk about something else for a minute, we're here.
Well, what we have, we're going to ask to give you a copy of the housing production plan, because this is an item that the planning board, and to some extent our board, have been talking about a little bit over time, and the town planner, Bill Clark, was here in the room, has done a lot of work on this with our outside consultant. This is a draft of the housing production plan. It's pretty lengthy. It's about 72 pages. And what we're hoping to do is, we'd like you as housing authority members to take some time, review it, give us any input you might have into it.
Okay.
It is a draft. It was done about a year ago, so there are some things that have been updated since then. For example, we're in the process of hiring an assistant town planner. We've revised at the last town meeting the cluster bylaw, the cluster zoning bylaw. So some things that she recommends have been done by the town already, and there are some developments. There's updates that she can make on the 340B projects that have gotten project eligibility letters. So what our plan is, Emily Ennis from the planning board will be in a little bit later on tonight. We'll be talking a little bit about the HPP. We'd like to set up a meeting with the consultant for sometime in August to have her come out. It'll be a public meeting. She'll give a presentation. We'd like to invite all of you to come to it if you can, if you're interested, and others such as the Clergy Association, such as the Affordable Housing Trustees. Get as much input as possible into it. So it's a draft. It's a copy that we wanted to just let you know about it, that we're hopefully getting close to adopting this within the next month or two. And as much input as we can get from people would be helpful. So if you wouldn't mind taking a copy of it, you didn't come in here for this purpose, but if you don't mind taking a copy of it, either letting Bill Clark know what your thoughts are on it, letting Dennis or Tom or me or Anne Marie, one of us, and we'll let you know when we have a date scheduled for Karen Sonneborg to come out and give the presentation.
Great, okay, good. Yeah, that's
We'd
all right.
appreciate any input you'd like to give us.
Mr. Duffy is, as you also know, a member of the Fair Housing Committee, and he has been the one on our board for a long time that's been very involved in this stuff, too.
Good.
He's more involved than I am, but anyhow, so,
So, Mr. Duffy, if you have comments, we'd be happy to hear them.
okay. Yeah,
Okay, good.
great.
Well, thank you.
Well,
Very
thank
good.
you.
Thank you.
Yes,
Thank you
thank
very
you.
much.
Congratulations, Philip.
Okay. Yep.
Well done.
Good evening.
Philip, congratulations. Thanks for taking this on.
Thank you.
We're on to Joe Lynch, is that right?
All right, thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank-
Okay, we're on to number 10 on our agenda, which is a meeting with Joe Lynch, our DPW director, for a number of items, starting with the hazardous mitigation grant for Unquity House. Hello, Joe.
Hey, Joe.
Good evening, how you doing?
Thanks for waiting, Joe.
That's okay, it was fascinating to, actually, most times I sit in the room with Senator Joyce, it's for a couple hours at a time, and far more detailed and far more aggressive in the conversation tonight. It's dynamic times, so it's great to hear a lot of that stuff coming to fruition.
The tree comment was interesting, wasn't it, about a new grant program?
It's on our wish list every single
I
year.
know,
and, you know,
I know.
when he gets to the legislature and he can, you know, kind of pound that table, it's effective. So, you know, much kudos beyond what the stable's already done, but, you know, from me and my staff, it's something you wouldn't believe the things he's got us involved in. It's wonderful things.
Good. All right, so you're here for a number of things tonight. Do you want to start with Unquity House, Joe?
Yeah, Unquity House is pretty straightforward. This goes back to the flooding from those March events of 2010, I believe. At that point in time, when the Neponset River flooded, the Unquity House sewer, which is right in that area, became surcharged. It's an elderly housing complex, multi-story, and for all intent and purpose, they were out of business. They had no way for the sewerage to convey through their own system and then enter into our system to enter into the MWRA system. Subsequent to any federally declared disaster, there then is follow-up for eligibility to those communities within counties where disasters were declared to have these hazard mitigation grants come out. And when those grants come out, they're available for public entities as well as private not-for-profit and public not-for-profit entities. And MRE is one of those private not-for-profit entities. So they were kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place and high water, if you will, and not knowing what to do, certainly knowing what could be possibly done, but no funding available. And what this gave them is the opportunity to go after that grant where it's 75% of those costs are borne by the federal government and 25% is a local match. And I say that in quotes deliberately because even though a private not-for-profit entity is eligible to apply, they must apply in partnership with the local municipality. So what this really is a contract between MEMA and FEMA. MEMA, the state agency, administers it on behalf of the feds, but they enter that contract with the town of Milton. The paperwork says it obligates us to do all the work, to carry out the construction, and to pay the local share. And what that is a $14,644 local share to offset the federal share of $43,931. So what this ultimately does is it gives them the vehicle by running through us to be able to leverage that money. What we would do, and Anne Marie has spoken with those folks, and I have spoken with those folks a couple of times, it's sort of cart before the horse, is we need to execute the contract with MEMA first. They have a kickoff meeting. When they have that kickoff meeting, they then lay down the groundwork of a memorandum of agreement between the town and that not-for-profit agency to secure the repayment. Long story short is it's a lot of bureaucracy. Welcome to a federal grant program. And, but it's good for them and it doesn't harm the town. There's a little bit of an administrative burden on our part, but it's not astronomical.
Joe, could you tell us what type of work is going to be done?
Sure. They, what they're basically going to do, they have a gravity system, 2 buildings connected through like a courtyard area. It runs out, if you know the area, it runs parallel to the Neponset River out to the parkway, then ties into our system, and it goes a very short distance, and it ties into the MWRA system. What it does when the floodings come, that system gets compromised. First component is a physical valve that they can shut down and prevent any storage from backing into their system. first aspect. The second aspect is to put in I think it's a 20,000-gallon holding tank, which gives them about 2.5, 3 days of storage, given their current housing load. But more importantly, say that the floods persist for longer, they can then pump that out and stay in business without having to evacuate a sensitive element of the population. So it's really installation of that tank.
Septic, is it a septic?
It's not
system?
septic, it's just a holding tank.
It's just a holding
It's just a big concrete vault in the ground.
And does it dissipate, or does it?
No, they have to be, when the floods go away, they open the gate and it flows out again.
I see.
You then would probably, if it's, several days, you probably would want to clean it out and pump the solids out as you would a septic tank. But no, it's a holding tank only, there's no septage, there's nothing infiltrating or soaking into the ground.
Gotcha.
So it's a good solution. We worked with their application very early on, and the solution, though it was their consultant and their own volunteer staff, who really kind of saw it through to fruition. But it was, as they applied, we wanted to make certain that it was something that was going to function, wouldn't compromise our system, and it's something that we could ultimately approve. So this is something we were involved with from pretty early on in the process.
Now, the match, Joe, is going to come from MRE, or is it going to come from?
It's going to come from MRE, but it has to run through town coffers. So I crafted a draft motion which speaks to those issues. What we really need to do is to authorize the execution of the contract with MEMA, and to authorize somebody, I suggest it was the town administrator, to negotiate a memorandum of agreement with MRE, and in one of those provisions in that memorandum of agreement was to also speak to how the monies move in. When the monies do move, the town would, at this meeting, would have to come and accept their gift for the match, which would have to be held in a special account for that payment. Because that match does have to be paid through us. And then lastly, it would also, the memorandum of agreement should speak to, their responsibility of any unforeseen cost overruns, which they'd be exclusively responsible for.
So we do have a detailed motion here.
Okay. I will move to approve the town of Milton acting as municipal agency on behalf of Milton residents for the elderly, MRE, a private, not-for-profit agency entering into a contract with the Commonwealth of Massachusetts Emergency Management Agency, MEMA, said contract being for the purpose of MRE making flood protection improvements to the sewer system at Unquity House, a residential apartment complex for the elderly, and further to authorize the town administrator or her designee to execute said contract and act on behalf of the town of Milton, and further to authorize the town administrator to negotiate and execute a memorandum of agreement, MOA, on behalf of the town of Milton and with the Milton residents for elderly, MRE. Said MOA shall define that MRE is solely responsible for contracting and undertaking all aspects of construction of the proposed flood protection measures, solely responsible for funding the $14,644 local share as obligated by FEMA and MEMA, solely responsible for funding all cost overruns of completing the flood protection measure, if any, above and beyond the total funding level of $58,575, $43,931 federal share, plus $14,644 local share approved by FEMA and MEMA, and to keep and maintain all records set forth and required by MEMA under the contract, and to provide to the town of Milton any such records as may be required by MEMA from time to time.
Second.
Any discussion? Joe, don't leave out any detail on that motion.
No, that was
It lays out the MOA as almost.
thorough.
Okay, then, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye, unanimous.
Thank you very much.
Joe, you're also looking to hire a seasonal employee.
We are. It seems as though just a week or two ago, we were here asking for an appointment of one individual for the season, and having no other candidates really who came forward who had any credentials or would be productive. And in the course of carrying out a recruitment process for a full-time labor position, we came across a young gentleman who lives in town who very much is capable and would like to come aboard for the summer. His name is Benjamin, I'm going to apologize, I pronounce it Demers, some people say Demers. I'm not sure which it is, and I apologize for that. And he lives on Thompson Lane, so very, very close to the yard.
Good, do we have a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve the appointment of Benjamin Demers, 59 Thompson Lane, as a temporary seasonal employee in the Department of Public Works, contingent upon approval by the personnel.
Personnel board. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Unanimous.
Thank you very much.
All right, Joe, we also have 2 other items on the agenda which are not on our attachments. One was the solid waste contractor update and the water and sewer forum. We had a memo from Toby's firm. Whichever one you want to start with.
Let's do this is the water and sewer. If you recall that we gave a presentation about a month or so ago, one of the things that we spoke of including in our water master plan was an element to look at the multi-tier rate structure that we have in place. And as a result of that, we conducted a public forum on July 10th here in this room, and gathered public input. We also opened up and announced a email address where people could make written comments as well. Present at that forum were, who spoke, were 4 people, 3 of whom were from one entity, 88 Wharf Street, which was actually the genesis of the concern when it was raised to us recently in the past many years. And a 4th person was a person at large who had a concern for that there may be some move afoot for the elimination of the town allowing second water meters for irrigation, and we clearly said that that was not one thing that we were considering. We did receive written email comments. We got 3. One speaking more in the general sense of the state legislature helping the MWRA out and therefore helping us out with rate containment. Really not germane to the forum topic. One was a citizen who just simply asked clarification of an equivalent municipal unit, EMU, and how that term was used, and we gave that clarification. And the other was another person from 88 Wharf Street who were echoing the exact same concerns as those who spoke at the meeting. So what it really boiled right down to is the forum is what we had heard, is that there's concern voiced by some that there is an inequity as it applies to how it is that we meter and therefore bill large residential complex or multi-residential complexes for that matter. The situation is the first water flows through the meter, and when you get to tier 1, almost immediately you're there, and you get to tier 2 rapidly, tier 3 rapidly when you're a multi-unit facility. And next thing you know, the vast majority of the flow running through that meter is all at tier 4. And they feel if they took, in this particular instance of 88 Wharf, that if they took that total flow, divided by the number of units, which is 73 units, effectively they would come in closer to tier 2 customers. So that was the concern. We understand the concern. So it's not abstract. It's pretty obvious constraint. What was made clear at the forum, and I'll make clear again, is that with the way we operate the water and sewer system, I do want to say right up front is, even though it's the water master plan, when we're speaking of rates, the impact is the same, water and sewer. So even though it was done on the guise of water master plan aspect, this discussion is for water and sewer rates. Okay. So the question then became, the fact that we generate all of our revenues in the water and sewer department to equal our expenses, that there is, in a perfect world, there is no surplus and there's no deficit, and you cover your costs exactly. Some years there's a deficit which is funded by fund balance in the year, or sometimes there's surpluses which return back to fund balance, and that's that buffer in the water and sewer enterprise. Literally, if you will, that is the equivalent of stabilization, if you will. We have from time to time use it to stabilize rates as well. So when you look at that, if you change your rate structure to affect a particular class, it needs to be made up by all the remaining classes. So if the town, the selectmen as water and sewer commissioners, were to consider changing the rate structure to offer some forgiveness in the way we approach rates in the multi-unit facilities, there would be a reverberating effect to the other classes at the Tier 1, Tier 2, and Tier 3 level. So what was tasked of us after that was to understand what the comments were. Were they more global? Were we missing something? And they weren't. What we heard, in fact, was that it's the multifamily issue, and I asked the selectmen at that night, and I'll ask you again, we don't think there are any others. Have you heard of any other concerns that we should be considering? And in getting that answer on the night of the forum, we went back and I asked our consultant to then sit down and let's start doing some real database analysis. Let's look at what is this affected population. You know, how many multi-unit facilities do we have? And that report is pretty comprehensive, even though it's not many pages. It's 3-page executive summary, if you will.
It's in the package.
But what we're really talking about is a total of 697 multifamily units in town that the town is aware of. That means the assessor's office is aware of it, and we issue bills in one form or another. That 664 of those, the vast majority, if you will, are two-unit buildings, two families, if you will. The next 20 are 3 families, and then it drops off precipitously from there to 6 units at the 4-family. I'm sorry, I'm referring to the Woodard and Curran memo.
Yeah,
You're quoting
they
them?
were in our packages, but for some reason, they're not attached to the,
In here?
I'm sorry, I'll wait until you find
Yeah,
it.
they're not hyperlinked, I guess.
maybe it's attached after something else.
Yeah, okay, I see it. Yeah.
You have it.
It seems tedious that I'm going into the numbers in such detail, but there's a reason for it.
Page 73.
73.
Finding it?
Yeah, we have it.
We good to move? Okay. So 697 total number of multifamily units in town that we know of, according to the assessor's records. But 664 of those are 2-family, 20 of those are 3-family, 6 of those are 4-family, only 1 is a 5-family, and 6 are 5 or more, which out of those 6, 4 of them are larger multi-unit facilities, like Uncudy House we just spoke of, and Milton Hill House, and
Fuller Village?
88 Wharf, and Fuller Village, the main building. So what that boils down to was then looking at the rates derived at that level, in looking at the administrative burden to be able to track this. In our software billing capabilities, our billing software capabilities, it became evident that if we were to consider some sort of a per-unit split, which is what was discussed in some detail, that it would be a manual task of calculating all the bills individually and then entering a manual bill into the system, at which point in time the collections can then be tracked in an automated fashion. Huge administrative burden. So we looked at threshold and then said, well, what are we really looking at? A lot of these smaller units, many of them already have 2 meters in them, so they're already getting that. I shouldn't say many. To get a precise number, it's kind of difficult to mesh the assessor's data versus our billing, our water billing software. They're just different account numbers and very, very difficult to do. But what we did recognize was that if we had to do it out of those that we thought, it would just be impossible without, with the current manpower and the current technology that the town uses for its billing to do that on a quarterly basis and then be able to track it quarter to quarter and year to year.
You're talking about just trying to track the 2 and 3 families.
That's correct.
Yeah.
So what we then looked at was looking at something larger than the 5-family. I think is the break that we went to, and I do have to read this in more detail, but I believe it was at the 5-family and above break where we hit the ones, the units that had the most concern, yet the lower units, which typically are coming in at the lower consumptions to begin with, aren't badly affected. And by looking at that, we then looked at the range of units that are billed out at each of those, and it did make sense that break point would be in that area of like 5 units or above. And one thing that came out during the hearing that I don't think was intentional, what was stated, but it gave us cause for pause to think it over. And what was said was that, quote unquote, many of our residents go away for extended periods of time. They have a vacation home in the summertime, or maybe they go to warmer climates in the wintertime, and as a result, we shouldn't have to pay. But by that statement alone, it's not unlike a single-family home that you all live in, that if you go away in that period of time, you use less water, and you may come in at a lower tier. So the fact that they're paying a minimum lower tier to count all of those units in at full adjustment is basically a double bonus. So if you look at our analysis here, we're really looking at a term that's called, what we're calling full adjustment and half adjustment. Full adjustment would be simply taking the total number of gallons of water and dividing it by the number of units. But they would get that benefit for most of them being at tier 1, even though they would have gotten a minimum bill to begin with. Half adjustment covers that a little bit further by saying that those people who do go away are still going to get the benefit in the total consumption being reduced, but those numbers would still get the minimum bill at tier, meaning the minimum bill at tier 1.
Joe, can you just explain that again? Are you
you're
saying that if
losing
you
me totally.
were to do the full adjustment, then someone who's away for the winter, say, under the full adjustment, they wouldn't get any minimum bill, but under the half adjustment, they would pay the minimum that a single-family homeowner would pay?
We're still not, this ultimate recommendation is to not meter individually and to not issue individual bills to individual unit owners or
Yes,
unit
understood.
rentals. But to use it for calculation purposes, to take the total number of gallons and divide it by the number of units.
I don't understand what the difference of somebody going away for the winter.
But that's what I was
very
trying to get at.
confused.
So, Joe, are you saying that the full adjustment, going through the manual process, that someone who's gone for the winter, under the full adjustment, they wouldn't be charged anything for the minimum, whereas under the half adjustment, they would be charged the minimum that a single-family homeowner would be charged?
That is correct.
Yeah, okay.
That is correct. It
So it
If
sounds
you
like you're...
calculate, if a substantial number of their occupants are gone for a lengthy period of time throughout any billing quarter, you could get that unit calculation down, that on a per unit basis kicks them all down to below tier 1, and they wouldn't get the minimum.
So you're saying that the half adjustment is the more equitable means?
It's more consistent to what the town does, yet it still gives them, at the higher tiers, gives them the ability to come down from tier 4 and tier 3 and perhaps into tier 2. And on the rare occasion, they get down to tier 1.
I'm thoroughly confused. Can you maybe just explain, just using a one customer's example of how those tiers work and why it's different?
I don't have the numbers for a particular customer. So let me just read what Toby and I went over, Mr. Feder and I went over, in understanding the issue, is that if we increase each tier size based on the number of metered units, then the number of lower units sold and the decrease in the higher units sold both happen. Given the inclining block rate that we have in Milton, this change results in a reduction of the billed value even though the overall volume of water is unchanged. To calculate the likely loss in revenue, we've used our database on consumption at those addresses, each of these target addresses. So a full adjustment is, in this scenario, is a multi-unit customer has their size volumes increased by a multiple equal to the number of units that the property has identified in the assessor's database. That is the exact scenario that 88 Watt was speaking of. But as we talk about the half adjustment, which is new information, we did not talk about that during the forum. This scenario is a multi-unit customer has their tier size volumes increased by a multiple equal to 1/2 of the number of units that the property has identified in their database. Now, the reasoning is that the full adjustment is fairly self-evident. It's just simply arithmetic, dividing by the units. What does require the better description is the half adjustment. It's large, multi-unit properties served by a single meter that may have a significant proportion of its units which are occupied only seasonally or intermittently. We got that out of the testimony at the hearing, or at the forum. If these units were individually metered, each unit would receive a minimum quarterly bill regardless of the volume of water and sewer used by each unit. So if you will, if you had numbers, let's say, 73 units in 88 Wharf Street, 20 of which were seasonally vacant, those people
We'll be subsidizing
no
the
water,
other.
subsidizing
Yeah, okay.
all of the others,
Yeah, I understand it now, okay.
okay? So that's, in that practice is done in other communities where they do consider multi-unit.
Right.
So, and the full adjustment, as we said earlier, is simple arithmetic, and that does provide that subsidy. So that's subsidy within that facility itself, and once that's determined, then the ultimate discussion becomes the subsidy to the rest of the ratepayers across town.
Okay.
So, using that as our targets of looking at what the impacts might be, we then broke out, and then the next chart shows down what the number of units affected at full adjustment and half adjustment would be. And what it really boils down to is, what's this percent impact on the average customer in town? And what's that mean in dollars and cents to those people? That's what it really boils down to. So, for the purposes of saving the tier structure, both at half adjustment and full adjustment, for 5 units and above, and assuming the rates that are in place right now, the FY14 rates, if you will, the effect would be, if we did a half adjustment, a full adjustment, it would be 0.6 to 0.7% increase for water, or 1.9 to 2.1% increase in sewer. What that boils down to in full adjustment is that on an average MWRA household,
$30.
it's about $30 a year. It's $5 in water increase and $25 in sewer increase per year. It's $30 per year that the average person in town would be paying a higher bill on to grant relief for that class of customers.
That's the full adjustment.
Under the full adjustment.
Okay.
Under the half adjustment, that range of percentages would be 0.3 to 0.4% for water, 1.3 to 1.5% for sewer. The effect on that one is $2.50 per year increase in their water and $17 per year in their sewer at current rates, which is $19.50 per year. So what's on the table now is any change, it's on the table for you folks to consider as commissioners, is that any change in the rate structure that affects that class of people with 5 units and above is at the expense of between $25 and $19, $20 per year, whether you consider the half a full adjustment.
Now, when you
across
went,
all other ratepayers.
when you went through this, did you consider the rental units as well as the condominium units, or just the condominium?
Did. What the assessors database records indicate, regardless of the form of ownership.
Okay, so we considered both.
That is,
And we knew which of those buildings only had 1 meter as opposed to multiple? Because you said some of them.
they don't correlate exactly, but I think we got it within, an order of magnitude that was satisfied. We got a representative sample.
Okay,
I mean, there are going to be some units out there the assessor simply doesn't know about, and there are going to be some units out there that we think have 2 meters in it that maybe the plumbing is.
and then obviously when you ran this calculation, you factored in that those condo and rental units are going to be water users, so they're in effect having the same increase.
That is correct. That is correct.
So it's spread over everybody.
Yeah, and and those numbers are based on the MWRA average customer, which is, 4 person per year. It's a tier 2 customer, not 4 person, it's 4-person household, tier 2 customer, year in and year out. Basically, it's, 100 cubic feet of water per quarter. It's just, it's a statistical average. When we do our annual rate report, we give you a whole broad cross-section across all the tiers and the various types of households. But hitting it right down the middle, we're looking at something on the average of $20 to $25 a year.
Now, would you make those adjustments just to tier 1 and tier 2, or would the rate adjustments go through all the tiers?
The percentage would probably ride through all of the tiers. The dollars are specific only to that MWA average customer, which is a Tier 2 customer.
Okay. I guess my question is, should we vote to do this? Because obviously, that savings has to be spread out. And are you saying we're going to take, I mean, that their savings, you know, the multi-unit savings obviously has to be made up. Are you saying we're going to make it up entirely from Tier 1 and Tier 2?
No, it's going to be made up across all the classes.
Okay.
But the dollar impact, just so it sets home to people, is presented on what.
Oh, in this example?
Exactly.
But in reality, it will go, it really won't be, because
That's correct. Our analysis.
there will be
was
Tier
made-
4 ratepayers that are going to be paying a little bit more too.
That is correct. Yeah, our analysis was based going across all of the tiers in looking at the way, you know, it is that we sell water.
And on the flip side, somebody who's just a Tier 1 customer will pay a little bit less than these averages.
That's correct.
So this is just an average.
Actually, Tier 1
average
customer will pay the minimum, because Tier 1 is a minimum. They'll always pay the minimum bill.
So they wouldn't even have an increase.
But will that minimum go up a little bit, or no?
Well, I want to be very careful, that everything I've just quoted was based on the rates that were in place from FY14. And I should have laid down my expectations of why we're making this presentation tonight, as a reminder that the next step is to give our consultant the guidance to sit and finish up the rate recommendation report, which we intend to bring in on the 12th of August to present to the board and vote it that evening, hopefully. But if not that evening, that on the 19th, that it has to be voted that evening in order to get the first quarter bills out on time. So without knowing what the recommendation of the board might be with considering the shift in this tier equity question, putting together the rate report for next year is almost impossible. You know. So if the inclination of this body of the Board of Selectmen, as Water and Sewer Commissions, are saying, we've heard the testimony, we've read the report, and we, in fact, feel that it is fair to give the higher tier customers of multi-unit buildings this fairness equity adjustment, that we're knowing that the reverberation is at those lower ratepayers, and we will then prepare our calculations and revenue demands based on our ability to raise revenue at those, and that's what we'll bring in. If you say that, geez, we're thinking this over, we're not, and I don't need that decision tonight, I just need that to get to the consultant by, you know, the end of the week or early next week in order to meet the 12th timetable.
Joe, you said, I just want to be clear, you said that other communities have taken an approach like this half adjustment or full adjustment, where they've
This is,
given this sort of relief to a multifamily development?
there are, not with regards to multifamily developments, there's a recognition of the half adjustment and the full adjustment, given those communities where there's an element of their population that go away, most notably like vacation towns like
I see.
Hampton Beach, New Hampshire, and Seabrook, New Hampshire, where you have this huge influx, that literally their rates support the rest of the town endeavors for the sake of having 10 years of population, 10 months, 10 weeks of population. Woodland Curran citation was a Rhode Island community. I don't remember the name of the community, but it was in the same, you know, summer seasonal type of community where folks just go away and use it rarely. And that's how they adjusted it. But it didn't necessarily apply to the multi-unit facilities. It's just how that is that they adjusted their minimums just in general.
So could you get us some, well, is the 19th, it sounds like that's okay to vote it that night, that we can do the final rate vote on the 19th rather than the 12th? It's not too late?
That would be the absolute last night, absolutely the last night. You know, historically, we brought it in the first meeting in August, and it's pretty straightforward once we get beyond this particular question. But if there still remains questions, it gives us that extra meeting to do
I'm just wondering if you could get us data showing the dollar impact on 88 Wharf, Fuller Village, just some kind of an example of what the half adjustment, what the full adjustment would mean for those communities, and maybe a little more detail on not just the 19 or 20, but if you can run somebody who gets a Tier 4 bill in a single-family house, someone who gets a
You know,
Tier 3 bill. Is it possible to get a little more breakdown?
Yeah, I don't want to commit for Woodard and Curran with them not being here, but what I'm looking at is out of this entire population, we're talking, if we are in fact saying it's 5 units and above, we're only talking 7 units, seven buildings, 7 facilities, so I don't
Yep.
think it's impossible. I am speaking out of turn because I do know Mr. Federer is away on vacation. So he'd have to, I'd spring that upon him via email and ruin the rest of his
Yeah,
week.
but like Katie said, just using FY14 rates
Yes.
and adjusting them.
Just a little more samples, so that we
Sure.
can get a
Yeah.
better sense of what does
What's
the
the
half
impact?
adjustment mean for Fuller Village, for Unquity House, for 88 Wharf, and what
And
does
then
it
what it
mean
means
on
on
a single family, a family of 5, and who
It
might be
puts
at
it in
Tier 4?
context, it sure
rather than-
does. I mean, you're telling you what it's going to cost on the average household. Otherwise, you need to compare that against what's the savings that they would realize.
I think that would be helpful.
Yeah, I do too.
Other comments or questions for Joe? Joe, I know another item you wanted to go over with us is the solid waste contract update. How we're doing with our new trash collection vendor?
Better. Every week, we've completed 3 weeks of collection now under the new system. First week, the vast majority of what we were seeing was combination of folks who just simply didn't get the word that if you were a Monday or a Tuesday, you are now a Wednesday, and, the vast majority of the calls we were getting on Mondays, my trash didn't get collected. Tuesday is my trash didn't get collected Monday or Tuesday. And the answer, by a voicemail, as soon as they got the phone call, it went to the greeting, gave them the information, so they were able to get it pretty quickly. So most of our calls were hang-ups, but those who did get through, they still weren't clear that we had a new vendor and a new structure. That reduced in about half the second week, and I'd say this past week, they were non-existent. I was driving through town, and I would make it a point to, canvass certain cross-section of each of the 5-day routes, just to see who was having trash out. That first week, a lot of people had trash out. Second week, far less, and last week, they seemed to get it. That's the customer side. On the vendor side of it, the first week, the vast majority of the concerns were, where is Milton? Where are the streets? How do I circulate through? How do I do it efficiently? How do I do it as quickly as I can? And really just trying to figure out and work the bugs out of it. There was a lot of that the first week, somewhat less the second week. Better last week, but still not perfect. We still got a ways to go. We're noticing last week, mostly what's missing are those, what we call the long private driveways. Those long driveways with 5 or 6 houses off of them. They have strange addresses, so even though it may have a Brush Hill Avenue address, you need to get into it from Truman Highway. And it was just hard for them to get a hold on that. So as we're targeting those are isolated, they're specific. Those we can just give them outreach and give them better guidance on that. So we are seeing it to be a lot better. What we're also finding is in the first week, I think their labor force throwing the trash into the trucks and the recycling into the truck, unclear on our regulations. What's a sticker mean? What does it really cover? What's a barrel that's too big? Why? What recycling don't we accept? That sort of stuff we found early on was just a learning curve they needed to get onto. Someone improved again in each of the 2 weeks. What I'm noticing, in the purposes of by pure accident in canvassing around and just trying to get a feel for it, and at the same token, looking at our revenues under the waste management. So this was with the old contractor, looking at where our revenues were with solid waste. We saw a pretty precipitous drop in revenues year end without a precipitous drop in tonnage. And they equate to each other. A sticker gets you a volume of trash at weight. And, if tonnage goes down, you'd expect your revenues to drop somewhat. If tonnage goes way up, you'd expect your revenues to go way up. We're a pretty solid community when it comes to, I do have the specifics, but I think we're like 4,850 tons of solid waste a year on average, and we stray 25 tons one way or that over the past 5 or 6 years without a heck of a lot of, that's pretty accurate numbers. So in canvassing, what I'm noticing, and this is, I think, more for the public to hear at home as much as for you people to digest as selectmen, is we have an awful lot of non-compliant trash barrels out there. I took Town Administrator Emery Fagan for a ride, and And simply put, I wish I had 2 cups of different sizes. Actually, we do. We have Paula's little coffee cup, and we have Dennis's taller coffee cup. If you put a sticker on each of those, and that's the right size barrel, 32 gallons, not more than 40 pounds, yet someone's using a 40-gallon, 45-gallon, 50-gallon toter that they bought at one of the hardware stores in the area, which they're selling in a wholesale fashion. They're going out the doors like hotcakes, and they're putting 1 sticker on it. That barrel is a 20% hit in our revenue, because they're putting more trash in a barrel that's not, and our vendor, our old vendor seemed to have been picking them up, and our new vendor is as well. So I'm not at all advocating a change in our sticker price. I think our sticker price is appropriate. It's where it should be. It's the proper price point. It serves the purpose of meeting our recycling goals, and we meet them well. But I think there needs to be some understanding, and I got a pretty good handle on looking at the sheer number of customers out there who are using these larger barrels. And I think we need to really consider a hard and fast rule. 1 sticker buys you 32 gallons. You're more than welcome to continue using your larger barrel. 2 stickers. And if you don't put the 2 stickers on the larger barrel, we're just going to reject it.
Is that on your website? The 30?
I don't have the unilateral authority to make that. I'm suggesting that as a measure of
No,
what
the
we're saying.
size of the trash barrel.
Yes, oh, yes.
Yes,
It's-
yes.
And
The
it's
size of the
published
trash
on our,
barrel,
yes, and that's published on the card we put out every year.
Right.
Sure. It's a long.
Do you think there's been just very recently there's been an increase in those? I mean,
I think it started out when we went to single stream, and I think people liked, not naming any hardware stores, but there are several large big box hardware stores in the area, and there are some smaller, mid-size hardware stores just over the border in another community, and there's a small local hardware store in town here, and they're all selling the bigger toters, and they're selling them like hotcakes. And you drive around, and you pay it, I think Anne Marie was shocked. We weren't even going out looking for them, and I just showed her a couple, I just drove in a couple neighborhoods, and we were coming up with 20-30% of the neighborhoods. And once one person puts them out, everybody starts going out and buying them. They're convenient, they're on wheels, they got covers on them. So, not that I'm trying to be sentimental about it, but someone who went out there and maybe spent good money, bought this new barrel with wheels and a cover because it's convenient and clean. I don't necessarily want to discourage them from using it, but I think we need to come up with a policy, and I do think that the 2 sticker per barrel approach makes sense and allows them to continue to use it.
I guess the only problem,
Or us to stick to our guns and hard and fast. Sorry, people, you can't use those, go buy a small barrel.
unless they're 64 gallon, you'd be better off putting 2 32s out and using. So, I don't know if they're 64 gallon containers, are
They
they?
exist, oh,
Yeah,
sure.
Well, yeah, I mean-
Actually, the toters that we have in our
Reheats.
municipal, those are exactly 64 gallons.
What Joe and I talked about was doing some education. Joe's going to reach out to cable. We're also going to put some press releases in the newspaper, going to put it on the website, and educate people again to what is the appropriate size to be putting out. Once we do that education, then putting the policy in place.
More
But we-
than education, I've already reached out with Michael, Michael Lynch from the Community Access Cable, and we actually just going to do a little TV show. We're going to get out there with the right size
Barrels.
barrels. We're just going to ride around town and put that barrel, and we're going to do a live demonstration and make it entertaining at the same time, you know. The thing that's difficult, and we spoke of, there's two criteria. It's 32 gallons max, and it's 40 pounds. Recycling is not an issue. The bigger containers, it's still lighter stuff unless you're filling it all with paper. But at some point, you're getting to something that's so heavy that the laborers can't manually get it in the back of the truck as well.
Right, right. Yeah, that'd probably be true with the 64 gallon unless you had
Didn't get it.
one of
The
those.
automated trucks, right.
Yeah.
So that's what was a tangential discovery in just kind of canvassing and in trying to pay attention to the level of service we were getting in this transition. It was astounding, and I'm looking at it from the perspective of where the heck did the revenue go? You know, and I think you could almost completely equate it to the pilferage of trash by volume, if you will.
Well, the impact on the revenue is important because we build our budget with these expectations that, based on recent history, will drive so much income from the trash sticker program. So if we're not meeting that and we're seeing a big change, that impacts other things in your department, Joe, whether it's vehicle maintenance or wherever else you might have to make up to absorb some of
Well, no,
the impact
I don't
from
wanna-
other DPW functions, wouldn't you?
No, I don't want to correct you in public, but it's not like water and sewer, which is enterprise, where we really try to look at that revenue. We have to get solid waste as its own sub-department, and we have contracts that have to fit within those budgets. But if the revenues fall short of projections, they hit the general government.
Right.
They do, but I thought that last year we had a similar issue, and I thought we made some adjustments in the DPW budget because revenue was starting to come in at a lower amount. Maybe not.
I don't
have to
believe
check
we-
that with Amy, but.
No. There are sometimes, first of all, the solid waste is, like I said, it's a creature of habit. The tonnages don't vary a heck of a lot, and everything else is a per-year flat fee for collection, if you will. So there's really not a whole heck of a lot of adjustment you can make within solid waste, for sure. If revenues are painfully low and there aren't increases in revenue elsewhere in the general fund, and Amy gets real alarmed, then she's starting to talk to a lot of departments head to say, whoa, whoa, you have to start pulling back on other things in order to not hit our free cash position. Or worse yet, to hit a deficit position.
Right. Okay, I thought we had done that
That's
last
what
year,
we-
but I could be wrong. Okay.
No, and even this year, Amy and I have spoken, we're not in a dire situation, but we did fall, about $100,000 short in the expected revenue on an $800,000 projection. It's not a small amount of money.
Okay. Well, something for us to think about for a future meeting. When is this show you're going to be doing? How are we looking at early fall that you'll be having that on the air?
No, we'll probably film it, this summer, pretty quickly, and I think they're looking for shows from time to time. I think
Yes.
they'll just keep running it,
So it should be on pretty soon.
Yes.
I would think.
But then we'll run it again in the fall when people are back from their summer vacations and make sure that they're well educated before we actually put that policy in
Okay.
place.
Yeah, so I think, I'm not asking to make a policy shift now, but I'm pointing that out as
At
a
a later date.
revelation of what we found. And my feeling is that we really have two choices. We can either be hard and fast, say, nope, 32 gallons and that's it, get rid of your big ones or use them for your own purposes in your own house, or we can consider letting people continue to use those, but just have them double the stickers up.
Double sticker.
Joe, do you know how many Facebook likes you have?
Public Works,
Yeah,
about 300,
that's just not a ton then,
about a fraction of the police departments.
yeah. Now, the only thing, because
Which is why we asked the police
You could run
department
that
to put our
video.
stuff on theirs, and they did.
you could run that video on Facebook too, but, because there's a certain viewer on, and
The people who like Facebook, they're already getting this information from us because they're already subscribing. They're getting this news as it rolls out, so,
Yeah.
we're hitting the same that target, more than once.
yeah, okay.
But yeah, the police department has a very solid Facebook following, and if we could somehow link it to them, I think we would hit, triple the hits.
They might be willing to put the word out for you. Joe, while you're here, just a quick update on Central Avenue. When you expecting that will be fully completed? It seems that it's
Still, yep,
making good progress.
Goal-oriented from the beginning of all this was to have it done and complete, substantially complete, before winter set in. It's still completely attainable with no difficulty. The angst was, of course, getting them in and started, but I was trying to be patient and say, you'll be surprised, you'll be pleasantly surprised, and they're going gangbusters.
Is it ahead of schedule or is it on schedule?
So it's on schedule. It's on schedule. And now they're getting into the tedious work, the curbing and the sidewalk work, and then there's moving those structures, the drainage structures, back out to the new gutter lines, and that takes time. Grinding up a roadway, getting a surface graded and paved with binder. People thought it was a new road. And really, it's only that very first step. So the phone calls went from, when the heck is it going to start, 10 times a day, to 0 phone calls thanking us. But it's going great, I think.
Us too.
Good.
You too? Yeah, good. And
All
I'm
right.
sorry for that inconvenience that we caused you, because I know you fielded a lot of calls when this thing wasn't rolling in the beginning.
Thank you, Joe.
Thanks, Joe.
Very good.
Thanks, Joe.
That's everything? Thank you. All right, the next item on our agenda is a meeting with our town accountant, Amy Dexter.
Hey.
Good evening, Amy.
How are you?
Good, how are you?
Good, thanks.
So you're here to talk with us about a contract relating to enterprise funds.
Yes. When the Mass Department of Revenue came out, or I think the report was issued September of last year, one of the recommendations was that the town consider adopting Chapter 4453E and a half, I think is it, which would make our water and sewer funds true enterprise funds. I know it's been a big discussion at town meeting the last couple of years. So what we'd like to do is try to bring that to town meeting in the fall, to get the town to adopt that. There's pretty much, we call them quasi-enterprise funds. They walk, they talk, they act like enterprise funds, but they're not true enterprise funds under Mass General laws. We adopted special revenue funds way back in the early 1900s, and that's how we operate. From an accounting standpoint, it wouldn't be much different, but what am I trying to say? I can't even think. From reporting to the Department of Revenue and whatnot, it would be. One of the biggest benefits for that is, I believe, and Joe can maybe talk on this if you want him to, there is some loan programs that in the future, if we haven't adopted true enterprise funds, we won't be eligible for.
Right.
But this contract would be to have the Abrahams Group come in and assist the town with writing the warrant articles, doing all the research, educating the warrant committee, the Board of Selectmen, department heads, as well as town meeting, so that everybody would understand what this would truly mean to the town if it were adopted.
Is that the only benefit to adopting this?
Well, that's the
grants?
The major benefit would be the grants, because for all practical purposes, we operate those special revenue funds like enterprise funds.
So have we lost out on a lot of grants over the years?
This is new. And there's
What's new?
The grant program.
the grant program that you have to be true enterprise funds. And part of this contract would be for Mark Abrahams to educate us on what the benefits are, maybe what the pros and cons are of
There is
adopting
one
it.
other slight benefit, and that's their independent free cash calculations. Whereas now, if you, and we had it happen before we had surpluses in the water and sewer fund a number of years ago. I remember when I was on the warrant committee, there was a deficit that couldn't, for that year, that couldn't be covered by any fund balance in water and sewer, and
Then it has to be covered by the tax rate. So
well,
this
it
would-
wasn't, actually, no, it didn't have to be covered by the tax rate, but it impacted free cash.
Right. Well,
So-
if you didn't have free cash, it would have to,
Yeah. I mean, it was made up the next year in water and sewer, but
Tom, what happens if there's a deficit in an enterprise fund?
it has to be made up the next year on the rates.
right.
But what we have right now can be made up with free cash.
No, it's still made up on the rates, but it dings your free cash for that particular year that you have the deficit, whereas in a separate enterprise fund, it would not do that.
It would have separate free cash for water, sewer, and general fund.
Then the question is, should we just have one enterprise fund, water and sewer, or should we keep the two?
Right.
Because you can do either or. I mean, there's a lot of,
And these are all the things that the Abrahams Group would help us to fully understand and make sure that we make the best decision for the town.
Also, one of the things that the Abrams Group proposed was that they conduct meetings with town officials, including the Finance Committee, the Warrant Committee, so we should let Ted Hayes know about this. He'll see the article anyway, that once we submit the articles. But, Tom, this sort of thing is right up your alley. Would you like to be the board's representative to go to these meetings with the Abrams Group and with
that's
Amy
fine.
and the Warrant Committee? We probably also should notify Kathy Dunphy, since she's our MWRA representative, just that we're starting this and we're going to be looking at it. She may have an interest in coming to some of these meetings. But meanwhile, we don't have a formal motion, but we have a draft of a contract here. So I will entertain a motion to approve a contract between the town and the Abrams Group Incorporated.
Got it here if you want. You want this?
Oh, if you've got a more, okay.
okay.
Wanna read it to me?
I move to approve a contract between the town and the Abrams Group, Inc., not to exceed $9,500 to assist the town in establishing enterprise funds for water and sewer activities beginning July 1st, 2015, and to address the Department of Revenue's recommendations.
I'll second that.
Okay, any discussion on the motion? And if not, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye, unanimous.
Okay.
Thank you,
so
Amy.
much.
Amy.
Have a good night.
Good night. All right, on to number 12, which is a meeting with Emily Innes from the Planning Board.
Hi, Emily.
Good evening, Emily. Emily's here for a couple of reasons tonight. Which one do
Yeah.
you want to start with, Emily?
Let's start with, so I'm here for 2 reasons, and thank you all for having me here. One is the housing production plan, and the other is an update on the master plan and a discussion of an article that the planning board is currently considering for the October town meeting. So for the housing production plan, as you know, Katie and I were charged with looking at town-owned properties and figuring out which ones might be appropriate for the town to put affordable housing on. So I had actually brought my map today, but I see you have a larger one there. I can run you through that, but before we do, let me just
move it over
talk
here?
about, yeah, exactly. Let's just
Put it up
talk a
on the-
little bit about
Put
what
it on the window so they can key in.
process is, yeah. Yeah, mine's a little bit more wrinkled than that, so I think yours will be a better one to look at. So we've got a couple of things that have to be done before the Board of Selectmen and the Planning Board can vote on adopting the housing production plan. We, the Board of Selectmen and the Planning Board, have to identify properties that we will commit to putting affordable housing on. So that's step one, and the properties are what I'll talk to you about tonight. And then the second thing that needs to happen is that Karen Sonnenborg, the town's consultant, needs to make a public presentation to both boards. So Katie and I went through and looked at these properties. I presented them to the planning board at our last meeting. I'm going to go over them with you tonight, and then the idea is that we would have a public meeting with Karen. She would make the presentation, and at that time, both boards could discuss the properties together and decide which ones would be appropriate for putting affordable housing on. There may be some properties that we would want to potentially commit to at that time, because we do have to commit to some properties, and then other properties that we'd like to identify for further study. So with that, couple of things. One is the property off the landfill access road, which a lot of people have mentioned in the past. Now, 2 caveats to that we'll want to consider. One is the animal shelter has been looking at least some of that. The other is there's a Native American site there. I believe it's one where they're passing through and creating tools. It's not a burial site. It's not a living site. But apparently in the 1980s, Mass Historic put all of that land underneath a protective jurisdiction of theirs. And so if we were to look at that site for affordable housing, we would need to work with Mass Historic and figure out what could possibly come out of that jurisdiction and what would have to remain in there. So, and I don't know that much more beyond that, but I know it's something that we need to consider. Now, the town lot at 131 Elliott Street, that is something that I know, so you see on your agenda, you're talking about that later on tonight, so I won't say too much about it, but obviously that is a good site for affordable housing if it were used with the lot next door. If not, it's difficult to develop because it's less than 7,500 square feet. So I think it's like about 7,050, somewhere in there. So that becomes a little bit problematic. But it's something that we should look at. The state DPW yard has been in play as a discussion, and of course you have your Granite Avenue committee looking at that.
Could I
Yes,
ask,
the Park and Ride, not the state
who
DPW.
came up with the minimum square footage? Was it you guys or?
No, the minimum square footage would be depending on the district that it's in. So I believe that's actually business. I can't remember what the minimum square footage is in business. I said 7,500 because I was thinking C, but it's actually business.
Zero Central
is business district, yeah. Residence C is the one behind that. So I can't remember off the top of my head what business is. But it is more than 7,000, I believe. So you have to look at that. And of course, It's not a problem because it's a town lot, but multifamily is not allowed in business district at the moment, so you have to look at the zoning. So not the state DPW, the park and ride has been in play as a discussion. Katie and I talked about, and this is coming a little bit out of some of the master plan discussions, of long-term planning. If you were going to plan for that area, and I have not seen the report from the Granite Avenue Study Committee, so my comments are based on that, is that you would look at the state DPW yard, the park and ride, and the American Legion Hall as one big group together, and probably look at 2 Granite Avenue on the other side, and figure out how to create potentially a multi-use district, which could possibly use affordable housing. I only mention that in the context of the town properties because the park and ride has been in play. Obviously, none of those properties are current town properties, but we should look at the possibility of long-term planning around that. Some of the other areas that we looked at that are town properties, one is, of course, the fact that the town will take in properties through tax liens. And the question then becomes, are these properties actually suitable for development as affordable housing? Are they ones that the town could sell as market rate and use the funds for affordable housing? That's something that's going to have to be on a case-by-case basis, but the town should consider a policy around those properties. And it could be based on where they're located, what type of property it is, and so forth and so on, but we should consider putting a policy in the HPP on that. Something else that we should consider, I know it came up in the Planning Board's discussions of our change to the cluster zoning this past spring, is the Poor Farm, the actual historic houses there, whether or not those are done by the town as affordable housing. And that is something that's already in existence. It's something we could potentially commit to now. Again, we have to commit to something in the housing production plan, but it also may be something that would require further study, given the fact that the Board of Selectmen is still in discussion, or not the Board of Selectmen, the Governor's Student Trustees is still in discussion on those. So, but I bring it up because it's been a topic of conversation before, and is certainly something that could be considered by the town. There aren't that many other properties that the town owns that are frankly suitable for development. We have scattered parcels. A lot of the parcels that appear to be under town ownership are parks or conservation, and obviously have other restrictions. Now, I did mention this at the planning board meeting down on the corner of Canton and Highland right here. That land that the police station sits on is larger than what's needed for the police station. It is not currently wetlands. It is actually dry land there. That could be considered for some sort of small development. The other thing it could be considered for, and this came out of the presentation that the Fire Space Needs Study did and made at town meeting, was would the town, in looking at the recommendation to replace fairly close to the current locations, but actually replace those buildings, would they potentially consider a joint fire and police station on that corner? It's a possibility. If that were a possibility, that then opens up the buildings behind Town Hall that are currently housing the fire station, the chemical building, as some sort of possible redevelopment.
Or vice versa, I suppose.
Yeah, exactly. The same thing with the East Milton Fire Station. If there is a fire station rebuilt in East Milton in an area that's a little bit easier for the trucks to get in and out of, that opens up the East Milton Fire Station building for some sort of development. Could be mixed use in that retail on the bottom and residential above, but that's a possibility. However, the caveat is both of those possibilities would be much longer term than any commitment for the housing production plan. Mm-hmm. So, Katie, have I forgotten anything of the town-owned properties that we talked about?
If you look,
Town-owned, I don't think so.
the red ones are the town-owned properties, so you can see how few there are.
Yeah, and in fact, that's an older version, so there's a couple more in there, but the ones up off the dump road, the old dump access road, aren't really on there. So
No, I think you got all the town-owned.
Yeah.
You talk about potential down the road nonprofits, it wouldn't be immediate, but long-term.
Yeah, that's a good point. One of the things that we looked at is there are nonprofits that have shifting abilities to keep going. Now, as far as I know, everybody in Milton, all of our nonprofits are in great shape. But when you look at decline in church attendance as a whole across the country, when you look at the shifting landscape for educational institutions such as smaller colleges, of which we have 2 in the town, that's something that if you were looking out over a 30-year, 20 to 30-year horizon, you would just want to keep in mind what as a town would we consider doing if an institutional use change, not the ownership changes. If a college replaces a college or a church replaces a church, it's not an issue. But if a church sells and is bought by a non-church, or other religious institution sells, or if a school sells and is bought by a non-school, i.e. something that's not subject to the Dover Amendment, we as a town should consider policies. And that's a much more long-term discussion to have, but it's something that we ought to be keeping in mind. So the thought for finishing this process is to have Karen Sonnenberg do a public joint meeting for our 2 boards and then a public presentation so that we can have public input. Sometime in August, we were looking at, depending, of course, on people's schedules, and then that would allow her to wrap up the plan in September or so and allow both our boards to vote on it, probably at a joint meeting, again, sometime September, early October. So,
And within the housing production plan, there are a lot of, I shouldn't call them recommendations, but just a plan to accomplish the goal.
right.
None of which I don't think we've discussed as a board. For example, of the new production, 80% of that production would be rental units. Well, is that something we want to support, not support? I mean,
Yeah.
all those have to be gone through and
And the planning board hasn't discussed that either, so we may have to consider after the public meeting, we might have to consider a second one before Karen
get all those
finishes her-
recommendations on
Yeah,
a
just
chart
go through
and go
those
through 'em. Yeah,
recommendations.
can we
mix-
support them, can we not
right,
support them?
Right, and mixing the public input portion with us going through them is going to make for a very long meeting. So we may definitely want to consider, effectively, the public meeting, take in input, have Karen revise, and then a meeting to go through the goals with her would make sense before we vote on it.
Right.
So I don't know what her scope is, to know if she has 2 further meetings in it or not, so that would be something worth checking with her to see what she has. But certainly a joint conversation about some of these goals would make a lot of sense.
Even if
because
it's only one, I think it would make sense for her to come in, give the presentation, answer
Yes.
questions that night. We can always decide at a later meeting without her what,
Right,
get
that's
back
true.
to her for purposes of revising it.
Right, that's
I
true.
would think so. There are some revisions we have to make already. We mentioned, before you came in, we had the Housing Authority here
Oh, okay,
tonight to
great,
appoint
yes.
a new member, so it was good timing. We handed them copies of the HPP draft.
Mm-hmm.
We're also going to, one of our benefits of having a former town administrator, John Cronin, still living in town and still taking an active interest in the community, is that he gives us a lot of ideas, and some of his good ideas were to put copies of the draft HPP at the library to make them available here at Town Hall. We'll also get them out to some groups like MRE, like Fuller Village, a couple of copies that, for the board, for not for each resident, we can't
Right.
absorb those photocopying costs, but just some copies to each of these institutions so that they can start looking at them, weighing in on them. The Clergy Association we probably want. So there's a group
Yeah.
of different committees, and we'll let them know at the same time when we'll have this meeting with Karen.
That's a great idea.
So that, because we'd like to get as much input as possible onto this.
Yeah, bringing people in who have an expertise in affordable housing and inviting them to that meeting would be a great idea, because we could certainly benefit from.
And certainly, both boards have to decide 40R, 40S, so
Yep.
can we get
Right.
behind it, not behind it,
Exactly.
and where, and
And
Yeah.
Tom, an intermediate step too would be that, we appointed this Affordable Housing Trust. The town meeting approved it several years ago. We created it several months ago. We appointed trustees, but we have no funds in the trust yet, so there hasn't
you have two
yet
things.
been a meeting, but
We don't have an official trust yet, I don't believe, even though we've appointed a board.
yeah. We need to,
We don't have any declaration of trust filed with,
Yeah.
so that needs to get done, but it would be good to get in a preliminary meeting of that, of the trustees, just to talk, and we want to get a copy of the
agree.
draft HPP out to the
agree.
trustees,
Yeah.
so they'll be on our list as well.
and as this report points out, that even without funds, there are things that an affordable housing trust could do to somehow promote
Yep. Educational campaigns.
things. And
Yeah, it's the-
Be all volunteer work, there'd be no money to do it with, but yeah.
And the master plan committee has a PDF of this draft plan. I can always ask them, well, certainly let them know when the meeting is, but ask them for comments. Is there a draft, is there a PDF on the website?
I don't think there is.
Okay, that might be one way
Bill
of
Clark
getting
would
it.
know if they're, Bill, do you know if this is on the website?
I couldn't find it.
Okay.
This is on the website. What we have here is what says housing production plan is actually a revision to the affordable housing plan that was done 2007. We updated a lot of the numbers. To go back to Tom's question earlier about, 80% of this or looking at different places. We took what we had in the first one and put into this plan here. We took this plan and handed it back and asked different boards to review it, show us where the changes are. And it kind of ran into a brick wall and became one of those identify what, identify where. And it is not meant to be, it's not ready for the public. It is ready for comment, and that's all it is. It's supposed to spark discussion.
Right.
You see something that needs to be changed, tell us what it is, where you think it is.
Right, that
And
was my
if it
point. The
can be,
boards have
we'll
to
do
decide.
that. Yes.
We
Yeah.
can support,
But
can't
it's
support.
just supposed to be it's a starting point for discussion.
But we'd like to get that discussion moving and have it progress without too many more delays on this. There's a lot for us to decide, right? So hopefully within the next couple of months, we can really move this forward,
What is
get it adopted.
what's the goal of the housing production plan? How many units?
48 a year, is it the right number?
Yeah,
If we're
yes.
going to,
Get your exemption.
right, get the exemption, it would be about 48 a year. So the question is whether or not
Ambitious
that's
goal.
doable and where.
We're
It is an ambitious goal,
560
so.
or
It
so
seems to
units
me
short.
that, and I know you put a lot of work into it, but all the pieces of land that you mentioned earlier,
They're not.
we don't own any of it. And the one we do, which is the landfill, there's a problem with that, with the,
And I don't know
That's
how
historic.
severe, I don't know how severe that problem is.
so
So-
is this a long-term goal?
Some of these are,
Obviously,
yeah.
it's not a
5 years.
short-term.
Well, first of all, the town can't, number one, doesn't have the funds to develop anything,
Right.
nor are we developers, so somehow you would have to get a developer interested in the property, and if it's going to be affordable and not under 40B, but under a local initiative kind of program, there are all kinds of, and it's a long-term project.
Right.
Yeah, and the focus of the discussion tonight is, here's some properties we've looked at, here's the process that we need to follow to get to the end. The policy discussion, I think, between the two boards is going to be a much longer discussion. But it's
Right.
just to let people know that we're working on it, and these are the steps that we need to finish to get there. So,
We are working on getting some additional, between Anne Marie and Bill, getting some additional units at Fuller Village counted. That there's more paperwork that's been submitted to the state to get that in process to help our numbers a little bit, which Fuller Village and Senator Joyce really pushed. So that's good. The more we can count, there's a few on here that are listed in the draft report too that are recent that need to get built into our SHI number.
And as part of the goal to change the cluster zoning bylaw that will incorporate some affordable housing?
well, the bylaw's already been changed. We changed it at town meeting, so we can tick that particular goal off. So,
Okay.
yeah.
All right.
And it does allow for some affordable housing. It doesn't,
Yeah, okay.
it's 10%. Yeah, that seems to be the standard. There are other communities that do different percentages. there are other communities that do things like inclusionary housing zoning. It's interesting because that moves back and forth in fashion, as it were, as people look at it. Some people look at the idea of doing actual zones, just inclusionary housing zones. Others look at how do you incorporate it throughout the community itself. That seems to be the best practices at the moment, seems to be incorporating it throughout the community rather than saying that's the affordable housing over there and that's the affordable housing over there, for I think obvious reasons. Yes. So I actually had to do some work on this, researching for another town in Massachusetts for work. And the ones I was looking at, not just in Massachusetts, but throughout the United States, it was very much a focus on incorporating it throughout the community. So.
So our next steps are to get the meeting with Karen Sonnenborg scheduled between the two boards. We have to work on everyone's schedules for August. It's a busy vacation month, so it's we get that done. And Tom, you'll get a meeting together with the trust.
Yes.
The trustees of the trust.
Together.
So then, if you don't mind, on to the next step, which is just updating you a little bit about where the master plan is and where it's going. Our consultants are hard at work at the draft plan. They collected a lot of data, both from a public forum in March, 3 roundtables in March, April, and June, a great many interviews with people, local institutions, department heads, and can I say that they were so impressed with the commitment of the department heads in this town to meeting with them and discussing the issues relative to their departments. So they had a specific roundtable just for department heads. So I just want to pass on how truly impressed they were with the people here in Milton. So they're busy writing the plan now. We've got a bit of a summer public outreach going. You'll have seen the boards downstairs in the front hall. We also have boards in the library. Those are being shifted out every week. Frank Schroth of 02186 My Town Matters is doing a question of the week tied to the boards, and I've been talking with the Milton Times. They're looking at doing the same thing. So we'll have some other public outreach strategies for that for the summer, and then this is all leading up to our final public forum on the 29th of September at 7 o'clock in the high school. And that's where the draft plan will be presented, and the consultants will be looking for feedback on the draft plan, particularly on the implementation strategies. Then town meeting will have a month to read that draft plan before town meeting or thereabouts. And I am asking on behalf of the Milton Master Plan Committee, the Planning Board, and hopefully you guys as well, to submit an article to town meeting to establish an implementation committee. Now, the draft that I'm going to give you tonight is one way of doing it. It creates it as a standing committee. There's a couple of other ways of doing it, and the planning board will be talking about it at our meeting next week. So you'll get, when it's time to submit the articles for the warrant, you'll get the final one. But essentially what this committee would do, it's a small committee. The intent is for them to be the keepers of the eye on the master plan, because you and the planning board, we all have sort of day-to-day things, so something like a long-term planning document tends to get a little bit lost. So what they would do is they would review the master plan, they would make recommendations to you or to the planning board, depending on whose jurisdiction the recommendations came in, as to the next steps. So if it's something under your jurisdiction, they'd say, look, we think that these 5 things are what we should be looking at in the next 2 years. And then we would have a choice. The Board of Selectmen or the Planning Board could then delegate to this committee to do some of the work. They could choose to appoint a separate committee, depending on how complex the recommendation is. They could do it themselves. But the implementation committee would be responsible for updating town meeting once a year about what has been done to implement the master plan over the last year and what's expected for the next year, so that town meeting is always aware that this is a living document, that it's something that things are happening, and that they have somebody that they can go to and say, hey, you know, I see on page 52 that this was expected to happen in the next 5 years, and I don't see you guys working on it. What's up? So it keeps the master plan from being a document sitting on a shelf, which, given the amount of money and resources the town has put into it, is really important. So let me give you this draft. I would be delighted if you could send me comments. I think you all have my email before, over the weekend or by the weekend. And let me know if you see any problems. I've had a couple of comments from the master plan and the planning board, master plan committee and the planning board already. So I'll be working over the weekend to come up with the final draft to present to the planning board. So, but so far so good.
Yeah, it's a great idea. I mean, just keeps the dust off it, just keeps it.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, at some point, parts of the master plan may need to be updated, and this committee would be the one to say, hey, it's getting a little creaky now. We need to do something about this. We've accomplished everything. So wouldn't that be nice?
That would be nice.
Yeah.
Well,
After all that investment.
yes, absolutely.
Time and money.
Absolutely. We don't want to let this be something that people just, didn't we do a master plan 10 years ago, 5 years ago? What happened to it? So,
Very impressive.
All right. So Emily, we're going to be talking about the October town meeting articles shortly. Some of them are planning board. If you're interested in staying, you can feel free. Whatever their preferences. Bill's here to talk about them, but if you want to
I
stay
think I
for
might
some of them-
disappear,
Might
actually.
disappear, okay.
But thank you for the invitation.
All right.
Thank you all very much.
All right,
Hey,
thanks
Emily.
for coming in. Thanks for that report on the HPP. Okay, the next item is the September state primary warrant. Do we have a motion?
I'll move to approve and sign the September 16, 2014 state primary warrant.
Second.
Any discussion?
Bless you.
Not all in favor?
Aye.
Aye, unanimous. Okay, closing date for the October special town meeting warrant, August 4th.
Make a motion to close the October 27, 2014 special town meeting warrant on August 4, 2014 at 5 p.m.
I'll second.
Any discussion? And if not, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. So for anyone out there who would like to be submitting an article for the October fall town meeting, that's the deadline, August 4th. After that, no articles can be submitted. Okay, next item we have is a discussion of the October special town meeting articles. We don't actually have draft articles yet, but Bill's here to talk about the concepts and what some of them will be. And Chris Hodlin is here also regarding, Chris, Bill has several, so Chris, why don't we start with the library's article, if you want to come up and join us.
2 minutes.
Hey, Chris.
How are you all? So I think you have a copy of the article that we submitted from the Board of Trustees.
I did see it came over late this afternoon. It's
I
not
did
in the-
read it.
Oh, I did
attached
see
here?
it. No, it was in the email.
It's
And I
in
can
the
talk to
email.
it.
Yeah, maybe.
And I just provided a couple comments. So basically what we'd like to do is to request an additional member on the Capital Improvement Committee, and we'd like to have one of those members be someone in the Board of Trustees of the library. So we're just trying to do our best to maintain, you know, the capital investment that the town, the citizens, and, you know, many private folks had made towards the library, and would like to kind of have a seat on the board to not only protect that investment, but others as well. So
I think that's a fair request because, I mean, the library really is a focal point in the town, and every kid, every parent has been in there at one time or another. And I think you should have a seat at the Capital Planning Committee.
this,
Let me just play devil's advocate for a moment.
Go
with-
right
with-
ahead.
With Dennis. Well, and I don't know that it's devil's advocate, I just want to bring up a couple of points. So we have 7 members on the Capital Committee right now. If we were to add 1, we'd have an even-numbered committee, which, that is a committee that takes a lot of votes. I think it's always, then there might be a matter of should we add 2 people to make it 9 versus 8. That's something we should think about. Maybe not. I guess the only, and I know the library has wanted a seat at the Capital Committee for a while. I guess the only thing I think we should think about is the cemetery and the parks and other elected boards who might suddenly want to come in and put members. I know that the cemetery, you know, has a lot of requests. I'm sure the parks do as well. That
Parks probably have the most.
probably they probably have a lot. So the question would be, I mean, I don't know if they've actually indicated they'd like to have.
They never
a formal
have.
seat at the
They never
table,
have, but that would be the fear that we just get an unwieldy committee.
This is a committee that has only 2, well, it has a member of the warrant committee, a member of this board, Tom Yara, representative on it, a member of the school committee, a member of the planning board. and just two, in the town accountant, and 2 residents, and it always seemed to me that maybe greater participation by residents who aren't affiliated with any board, and maybe the whole composition of the capital
so you're
committee
not just
should.
advocating for yourself.
Well, because otherwise we'll have the schools advocating for all their projects, the library advocating for all of theirs, the parks, if they want to see, advocating for all of their projects.
Right.
I understand the library's a new resource, and within the last 5 years, it's been a substantial investment. It makes sense that the library would want representation. I just think we'll probably, once this filters out into the news, we'll have the cemetery trustees and the parks coming in with an article on August 4th wanting a seat at the table as well. So that's just something that, collectively, town meeting members, all of us might want to think about. Should we look at the composition of the capital committee more broadly and think about whether it makes sense to have representatives of boards on it, or just, a committee like the warrant committee where it's 15 members from the general public who are put on and who are not representatives of any particular department or board. Food for thought, I think that's all I'm.
And we actually talked about that. So I think we have some of the same concerns of some of the people that might come forward. That being said, short term, which we have a short term, goal is to try to get some, membership on there. We do have a large capital investment. I'm not sure what the capital investment in a building for the cemeteries or the parks is, but we did a lot of work around designing the building to, be able to have, as few employees as we could, and we want to make sure that we, maintain the capital. So, things like HVAC and the computers and things are all coming up after the 5-year, mark. We don't want to be here again in a while, any of us, trying to rebuild the building. So, that being said, I think there's several members of the warrant committee that have been, that are our trustees, that understand that there's a wider picture to look at, and I think we would certainly look to do that as well.
And I think
the advocate for that is Bill Ritchie. He is a member of that committee, and
he's a non-voting member, right? But
no, he's voting member, I believe. He was appointed.
You appointed him.
He's appointed, but in the bylaws, he's not. I don't think he's a voting member. I thought that was a question about one time about making him a voting member or not.
I think we did that at one of the town. We had a town meeting vote actually. The first year he was on just as a non-voting, but
All
then
right. Maybe we amended the bylaw, but
I think
we should check the bylaw on that.
But he would be the advocate for any building that comes under the purview of consolidated facilities, of making sure that the buildings are properly maintained, and he does just that. I mean.
But that said, in the library's, defense, I can understand why they're making the request, because I think there was an issue, Chris, last year with computers, where computers that you were looking for, and correct me if I'm wrong, didn't get included in the capital budget, and had to get funded out of, I don't know, free cash or some other one-time funds, and that was going to have some impact on your budget.
Yes.
Well,
if you didn't get that funding. So I remember the warrant committee had to
there were
do
two
some
issues
separate
with
funding.
But we asked, as a capital committee, we had requests from 3 places for computers.
Yeah.
So why can't you all get together and just do one joint procurement of computers, rather than having 3 separate procurements? But then the same request, I think, at the same time as with the capital committee, it was also it was also on the wish list of one-time expenditures for the warrant committee. So there got to be all kinds of confusion as to whose list is it on. And we even had on the capital committee, we even called, we even put a phone call into Will on his cell phone to say, who's funding this thing? So it wasn't a matter of it not being funded. It was just a matter of it was in too many places at the same time.
So maybe there's some extenuating circumstances there, but I remember that was an issue that the warrant committee was debating.
There was, yeah. I mean, there was
spring.
one year when it was denied. Last year it was put in, but I think it was supposed to be funded by ourselves in a different method, and it ended up coming out. So,
right. It did get funded. And the only reason we took it out is because the warrant committee approved it as one-time money. Otherwise, it would have stayed in.
But if it hadn't gotten funded out of one-time money, I think it would have impacted the state certification. Is that right?
Yeah, and I think one of the other areas, like I said, the building design, one of the other areas is the sorter, is the machine that we're looking for, $10,000. That's $10,000 that saves us an employee, a full-time employee. And that's a significant investment, if we have to hire another person, you know. And as you say, since the 5 years, since the library's been renovated, the usage of that building and the circulation has done nothing but increase every month, month to month to month. So, you know, we just feel like it is a significant community, you know, service that we're providing.
Yep.
So totally understand the wider picture, and, you know, I don't know if that's, you know, obviously you guys can take that up, whether that's the government group or whatever, but what's the real perfect makeup, I don't know. But right now, we would like to see if we could get a seat at the table. Short term.
And the library is one of the bigger budgets compared to, you know, I mean, the schools, obviously, they're the largest budget in town, and they have a lot of items every year on the capital committee, but the library's a pretty big budget as well. It's my only, and this is something for town meeting to decide, not for us to decide, but that would kind of be, those would be two issues I think we should think about. Do we want an 8-member committee, or should we go to a 9-member committee if we're going to add one board? And should we think about even adding an article to either piggyback this one or I think we should think about the number, but also might this prompt the parks and the cemetery, even though they don't have buildings. You know, the cemetery is always wanting money for roads in the cemetery and different items that they have. So, you know, this might prompt other independent boards to seek a seat at the Capitol table.
Right. Yeah, and the parks are experiencing, I mean, just, again, deferred maintenance. You know, tennis courts are in deplorable condition. Basketball courts are in deplorable condition. Ball fields are, you know, constantly need. And there's no money for, you know, it's all capital requests. So they're as much as anybody. You know, it's not a building, but it's.
So you're planning to submit the article, Chris, the library
We would,
trustees?
yes, yep. We're planning to meet with the warrant committee. I think it needs to be approved by you, or we'd like to get it approved by the selectmen. So go forward.
Just for inclusion in the warrant?
Yeah.
Okay, so I just throw that out there as food for
Yeah,
thought, and
no,
things that you might
we've
anticipate,
thought
questions
about it, yeah,
come from the
and
floor. I'm
I'm
sure
sure-
you've thought about it already. Okay, well.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, it's really a town meeting matter in terms of whether they want to do it or not. So.
And it's a good subject to discuss with them, I think.
Yeah.
So we're.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chris.
Thanks, Chris.
Okay, Bill, lots of zoning articles.
Okay. Planning Board has several articles that they want to put on to the October town meeting. One of them has to do with the St. Pius site, and it's a townhouse PUD. The submitted article is an attempt by the Planning Board to allow multifamily development at the current St. Pius Rectory site. The site has physical and economic constraints that this zoning looks to address. The bylaw would allow for diversity of housing types while providing for historic preservation, open space preservation, site-specific design review, affordable housing, and an acceptable neighborhood density. That is followed by a townhouse PUD that can be used generally. Planning Board submits this article as a more general application of the previous article. It's an attempt to allow development of certain undeveloped or underdeveloped properties, allowing for a diversity of housing types, while also providing for historic preservation, open space preservation, site-specific design review, affordable housing, and an acceptable neighborhood density.
So Bill,
So this would have an inclusionary of some kind.
Yes.
Yeah.
so Bill, these are the two.
One of them has to do
One is being drafted by
specific-
Alex, and one is being drafted by Brian Furr. So these are the two that you're referring to here, right? Is that correct?
Basically, no, the first one was something that is being developed by Alex in concert with a developer who actually owns the St. Pius site. Has been meeting with the neighbors, has Ned Corcoran as his lawyer, and there has been a lot of discussion on that site. That particular site does have some physical constraints that are a little different than anything else we have. That one of them, the back boundary abuts the housing project in Hyde Park. The front boundary abuts Curry College. It is an 8-acre site, and it is in a desirable neighborhood. So how do we make something in there that can fit and help hold the values in that neighborhood? The second one is something that, there's a couple of different members of the planning board who felt that we shouldn't just be looking at things site-specific, that we needed to look at things a little more generally. There's a comment that's coming from the master plan meetings, the public sessions that we're having. It's not just Brian, it's Emily is doing that with him.
Okay.
And there's been a lot of discussion about that particular one at the different master plan meetings themselves. The third article is a bed and breakfast. An article submitted by the planning board after the master plan sessions and questionnaires stated that the idea has merit. Currently, there are several bed and breakfasts operating without rules or regulations, oversight, or community benefit. This particular bylaw would allow for all of the above. Closely followed with that is the hotel tax bylaw. This article will allow the town to impose a hotel tax if the bed and breakfast article passes. Number 5 would be a signage rewrite. This article will change the approval of zoning-controlled signs from the selectmen to the sign review committee. Currently, the sign applications start with the town planner, go to sign review, and then go to selectmen. The selectmen are currently required to approve signage if the zoning is for a restricted sign, such as certain signs in the business district can actually go to the building commissioner as long as it's an unlit sign. It just has to go through design review.
Bill, is there a draft of this one available?
Not yet.
Not yet. Because two things. One is, we probably should think about whether we support this. I know it's a planning board article, but the question is, if right now the authority rests with this board, if we're going to turn it over to the sign review committee, and I think we should weigh in on whether we want that. And there are arguments on both sides of that. But I guess more importantly for present purposes, we had some emails on this today, but as you know, the Kennedy carpet sign, Sleepy sign last winter generated a lot of discussion, and one of the sign articles that we'd like submitted is one that prevents or prohibits these flashing, multicolored neon signs. And your thought, Bill, was maybe this could get addressed through a handbook. I think the boards would like to put this in a bylaw. At least that's what we had talked about a few months ago. I don't know if anyone's changed their view on that.
To kind of rewrite that bylaw a little bit and work with the planning board in doing so.
Yeah.
I think my comment today was one more of, you can change your handbook like you change regulations. You have a much harder time changing your zoning bylaws. Your signage shouldn't be controlled, the design of a sign shouldn't be controlled by zoning. It should be controlled by the handbook. The placement of the sign, the number of signs, and whether it's lit or unlit, those can be done by your zoning. But to change the technology component, I mean, to come out and say no LEDs. Well, LED is a technology that is dealing with lights. It's not just the signage that you can flash the message by changing a few colors and making it brighter here, brighter there. It's actually, you just approved the Blue Hill Bank signs a couple of weeks ago. When you did, that Blue Hill Bank sign over the door, that's lit by LED lights behind the panel. So
Yeah, I don't think we want to, because even.
that's what I'm saying. You don't want to get into the point about zoning the technology. You want the technology to be picked up in the handbook, and you want to just stick with the zoning, lighting, location, the need.
Yes, but even last winter, when we were talking about Sleepies, we said there's a lot of LED signs, like the extra space storage building, that's an LED sign.
No.
It's not the LED technology that we'd want the bylaw to address, it's the flashing signs and the Vegas look that people were calling it, which is no longer the case on that building. It's just one sign that doesn't change, doesn't have multiple colors. But the idea is to prevent something like that in the bylaws so that we don't have a future building, somebody coming in here wanting to put a sign that's going to flash 4 different messages in 6 different colors. That's what we want to prohibit, and I think that's what we talked about putting into the bylaw. The LED technology, maybe that gets addressed through the handbook, but shouldn't, I mean, I guess that's a question of what's the will of the board.
LED itself is not discussed at all in the handbook. The handbook was written before the LED technology came out.
But isn't it an appropriate topic to include in the handbook? But the bylaws should talk about the Vegas signs, and whatever language we have to come up with to prevent the flashing signs, the neon colors.
I still think that you should put it in the handbook. It wasn't the sign review committee that approved the Sleepy sign. They actually didn't approve what was put up. They didn't approve the Sleepy sign. They didn't approve the Kennedy carpet sign. So.
No, it was this board that approved those signs over a number of years.
Right, but I mean, that's, again, the sign review committee approved what the handbook would allow. And they tried to design, or they do still try to design signs dealing with what the handbook allows. So if the handbook is giving, that's your rules and regulations for that committee. That's your design guidelines.
Question is, does it have the same force as the bylaw? What if we were to put a prohibition in the bylaws for no flashing? We'd have to get the right language. There may be a circumstance where a changing sign might be appropriate, but we want to avoid the Vegas look that we got all the complaints about last winter. I mean, at least I'm speaking from my memory of what all the comments were last winter. I think as a board, we should figure out, do we want to submit a separate article that would address that? Or can we try to work with the planning board to get their bylaw to pick up our issue as well?
This would be better.
I'll discuss it with Alex and see what I wrote and what he wrote, see if it can do that.
Maybe if you circulate that draft to us, we can all look at it individually, give you back some comments.
See how far he is.
Okay, because the problem is that our next meeting is not until after the warrant closing deadline.
Right.
So.
Right. But you are right, this started out as it was going to be a joint effort of the two boards to come up with a better bylaw.
And the planning board is going to be voting on whether they send things forward on the 30th, July 30th.
Okay, July 30th, okay.
So the next Wednesday.
So why don't we do that? Why don't you circulate whatever draft you and Alex have come up with?
Right.
Let us weigh in on it. I mean, are there other items, Dennis or Tom, that I mean, are we in, is that, if I correctly stated what I think the
Yes.
board's view is?
Exactly.
Well, I think some of the vagueness and the fact that the bylaw may be just maybe out of date at this point, and just to relook at it. I guess Bill is right. A lot of it can be handled by handbook.
Yeah, some of it probably can.
Those are your design guidelines.
That effectively become.
Neon signs are not in there. Flashing signs are not in there. I mean, it's the ability to specifically say in that handbook, no flashing signs, no, changing message sign.
But should the bylaw deal with lit signs or not? I mean, I don't know.
The lit signs have hidden.
Again, in a general way, not necessarily size and brightness, but just they're either allowable or they're. I think right now it says they're not allowable.
I think that's an issue that the sign review committee hasn't even taken up, is taking on which ones should be lit and which ones shouldn't. Where do lit signs belong? Where do unlit ones not belong?
All right, let's take a look at the draft. We can always
Okay.
weigh in, and if necessary, we can work with town council to draft a separate article.
Yeah. There was another one that just came to mind too. In the master plan committee, a lot of discussions on our bylaw does not allow a sign to jut out from a building. It has to be flat on the building. Whereas you look at most really quaint towns and they have.
Blade signs.
Yeah.
What are they called, Bill?
Blade.
Blade
That
signs.
they come out from the building.
They're very attractive. They can be.
Yeah.
And that's something the master plan committee has,
It came up in the public
Talked about.
discussions.
Discussions, yes.
And there's a few that are grandfathered in. Most of them, our design review book said no, so the committee started saying no.
So it seems we need to take a more comprehensive approach to this topic.
Yeah.
I think it's one that the handbook needs to be reviewed every few years to, is it keeping up with what you want for the signs to say? I mean, it's technology, it's changes in design. They need to be reviewed occasionally, and
Is the handbook online?
There's
It
someplace,
is?
yeah, because
I haven't seen
I
it.
sent it to you. I sent you a copy of the book with the
Oh,
email.
with that email,
that went
okay.
out.
I didn't have a chance to look at any attachments. Okay. Maybe if you could forward it then to Tom and Dennis as well.
I've seen it before. I think, Matt, I have a copy of it someplace.
Yeah, I've seen it.
Okay.
I think I send it to you each time we have one of those very controversial ones. Kennedy, Sleepy's.
All right. So what, we should probably work on
I know that needs to be
getting
updated.
something different or incorporating, if the planning board will
All right,
take it into theirs.
I'll talk with Alex and we'll see what we
Okay.
can come up with. The Master Plan Implementation Committee. Emily just talked about that one.
The easement,
The next ones don't go to me, but there is one down the bottom that does.
the easement.
I have one called the Selectmen's Acceptance of Easements for Utility Purposes, down at the bottom of the page. This article allows the selectmen to accept utility easements for the town. Typically, if an easement from a subdivision is out there and it's say a water line, the water line belongs to the town, and the town wants to maintain that water line, there's an easement. If the easement isn't granted, usually you would have to go to town meeting. What we're doing here is when a utility easements are required, the developments, the current process is every easement requires town meeting approval, thus taking an inordinate amount of time, holding up the project, the recording, and the start dates. This case, with this article, once a year, the town meeting will vote to allow the selectmen to accept easements for this purpose.
Explain that differently.
I have a water line that goes in, and it's a town water line. It goes in through a subdivision.
Yeah.
The line breaks, and it's going across private property. How do you go in and dig up that line? It's your line, but you don't
The
have
town,
an easement.
okay.
I need the ability to go in.
So you need the
fix
easement
that
from the
line.
developer.
Yes.
What
Or the
about private
homeowner.
roads?
It depends if we're keeping that water line as ours or theirs. If it's a private water line,
Yeah.
then it's a separate issue.
What if it's
Public
a
water line,
private water line going to a hydrant?
it would be a private hydrant, it wouldn't be a public hydrant.
Private hydrant, okay.
So it would be the landowner's problem.
Bill, this would become an article each year in the warrant,
Yes, just like,
like the revolving funds?
yes, 53G, or 53E, I guess it is. And then there was the change of land use for the land at the end of Quarry Lane off the access road for the landfill. The land was taken by eminent domain for municipal landfill purposes. We changed part of that land use to, for golf course usage. The other part is still listed as landfill purposes, and to take and change it back to municipal usage requires a town meeting vote. Mr. Flynn will write the article. He'll write the last one too, the easement one.
Okay. Okay, thank you, Bill. There's a couple of others.
There are 3 more articles, Madam Chairman. There is an article that was requested by the chair of the warrant committee. A special purpose fund for override reserve be created. In the
He's talked with us about that
I've
before.
got well, first of all, if you have an override that exceeds what you need to spend in a year, you just don't, it just becomes excess levy capacity. There's no need to, you just wouldn't include it in the tax rate that year. It just becomes excess levy, and it's available the next year to be used. So there's no need for a special purpose override reserve.
I think this grew out of the fact, didn't it, that some money was put into the stabilization fund
Yes.
1 year and then taken out the next year?
That's what they
But
did.
that wasn't from an
and
override.
Was that
It was
federal?
from free cash from the prior year.
Right, but
Free
that's-
cash, and it was
but
put
that's not
put
override
into
money.
the stabilization.
Wasn't it the federal stimulus money? It
But
wasn't
again,
when I was on
it's
the
not
warrant
an
committee.
override.
No, I know.
It was-
But is that what it was from? I wasn't
Could've
on the
been.
warrant committee at the time. I think it was
I don't
federal
remember.
stimulus.
And it was to be used for the next fiscal year, so they parked it in the stabilization fund. In our conferences with our bonding rating agencies, they frown on the town doing something like that, parking the monies in the stabilization and then taking them out in the next year. So the chairman of
Yeah,
the
it
warrant
was
committee
under
just...
you, and it started, for whatever reason, it was some excess, whether it was free cash, but it was appropriated.
Yes.
And I don't remember what the source of the
It
revenue was.
wasn't from the 2009 override, you're saying?
No.
So we should do a little more research on that question.
Yeah, and again, if it was override money, and you just wouldn't appropriate it, and then it's just available the next year as excess
Where do you
levy
park that
capacity.
money, Tom?
You don't park it any place. You just, if you don't increase your tax revenue by what you're legally authorized to, then you can utilize that portion that you didn't use in a following year. That's what the excess levy capacity is.
I see.
So, in other words, if we didn't need all of the 2.5%, and we only used 2%
Yeah.
of, we only appropriated 2% of extra this year, then we're legally authorized to go 2.5%. So the difference becomes excess levy capacity, which can be utilized in a future year. So,
All right, so we'll just
We'll do
look
some
into
more,
that.
yes.
Okay.
The next article is what your town accountant talked about earlier today, to accept the provisions of Mass General Law 44, Section 53E and a half, to establish the enterprise funds.
Should it be beginning July 1, 2015, or 14? I guess
It should be 15. yeah.
15.
it should be 15,
Yes.
even if we appropriate. Yeah,
Yes,
we
it
did
said
this
in the letter,
October.
yeah,
I thought
that's
so.
just,
Okay.
yep, that's just a typo. And then the last one is an article that the Capital Improvement Planning Committee requested, and this is for the water tanks and infrastructure work that relates to the town of Milton and the Canton Water Agreement.
Okay. Is that all of them?
That's all that we have, and I didn't know if...
That's it?
Any others that we haven't talked about, that we as a board want to think about submitting? This would be the
This
time
is
for
your
us
last...
to talk about it.
Yes, this is your last meeting before...
Other than the signage one that we'll look into.
right.
It's actually
Gives you
quite a lot of
approximately,
them.
approximately 12 articles for your fall town meeting.
Fortunately, they all are appropriate. The ones we're talking about, I think, are
Yeah.
appropriate
I think
for.
we learned our lesson last year.
And the idea has been to try to get some zoning articles done in the
Agreed.
fall, so that we don't have them in the spring with the
Right.
budget. That would be a good thing. Okay, then anything else on this topic from anyone? Okay, then we'll go on to 0 Central Avenue. So we'll give an update on where we are at. Senator Joyce was in earlier tonight, so we touched on this topic, but so on behalf of the board, I will report that on July 7th, at our last meeting, we voted to authorize a request to be submitted to Governor Deval Patrick to file with the state legislature special legislation relating to the sale of the town-owned property at 0 Central Avenue. The legislation would facilitate redevelopment of the property at 0 Central Avenue and further revitalization of the Central Avenue Business District by authorizing two things. One is for the town to acquire approximately 1,200 square feet of land adjoining the 7,000 approximately square foot parcel that the town owns at 0 Central Avenue. And number 2, the board conveying both parcels to Carrick Realty Trust, or the then owner of 131 Elliott Street. And the authorization would be contingent upon the use of the combined property for a mixed commercial and residential development pursuant to a special permit issued by the planning board under section 3J of the Milton zoning bylaws. The request was submitted to the governor along with draft legislation prepared by our town council, and it was reviewed by the governor's staff, the inspector general's staff, and Senator Brian Joyce and his staff. And as a result of that, changes were made to the draft legislation that were consistent with the purposes of the legislation that we proposed. The legislation was filed by Governor Patrick on Thursday, July 17th, with a request from the governor for early and favorable consideration. Today I spoke with Representative Walter Timilty, who told me that the bill was read in the House chamber today, and it's been referred to the Joint Committee on Municipalities. And Representative Timilty told me that he had a conference with the Speaker of the House's legislative director. So I think collectively we're cautiously optimistic that even though timing is short here, July 31st is quickly approaching, that hopefully everyone is working very hard to get this passed. Senator Joyce, Representative Cullinane, Representative Timilty. So on behalf of the board, I want to thank several people who made it possible for us to get to this point. The legislation still is going through the process. It's not enacted yet, but to get us to this point, starting at the top, first and foremost, to Governor Deval Patrick and his staff. Thank them for their efforts. Also, Senator Brian Joyce, and a key person in his office is his chief of staff, Emily Kautoniuk, who was quite helpful in this process. Both Representative Timilty and Representative Cullinane. The Henry's property, we all know, is in Dan Cullinane's district. It's in Precinct 2. But for something like this, we'd want to have the support of the full legislative delegation from Milton. So both Representative Timilty and Representative Cullinane have been very helpful in the process, supportive of the Board of Selectmen's legislation, and both are working to try to get this quickly moving through the House for us. The Inspector General's office also was involved, and we thank them for their help with this. Town Council John Flynn, Planning Board Chairman Alex Whiteside. Brian had a lot of nice words to say about Alex. Alex has been helpful to this board, and I think communication and cooperation between the boards is a good thing. We and the Planning Board together have a lot of interest in some of the same things, and it's good that we're working together, and Alex has been helpful to this process, so I do want to thank him. And also two people who never get enough credit, I think we'd all say, and that's our Town Administrator, Anne Marie Fagan, and our Director of Planning and Community Development, Bill Clark. So both of whom also played a role in this and have been key in getting this to the point that we're at so far. So legislation's pending. It's House Bill 4332. And any other comments on this? Anyone, any thoughts? Or
Other than it goes without saying, there's still a lot of hurdles
yes.
To be overcome before any kind of a deal comes to fruition on this thing. But it's a start. It's a positive start. So.
To start, it's something that Brian Joyce put on the table a few weeks ago, and government moves very slowly. I've certainly found that out in the last year, if I didn't already know it, having been on the warrant committee. But at all levels, government, there's so many different channels that you have to go through to get something done. That I think to get this to this stage this quickly has been a combined effort by all the people I mentioned, and in particular by Senator Joyce and by Alex Whiteside and our town council. So I think we owe them a great deal of thanks.
I think it's important to point out, Katie, that even though there has been a lot of work put in even by you as well, and you've got to be complimented for that, we still have to get the developer to agree after all this work is done, and if it gets approved.
Yep. And
he's in the middle of trying to get 57 units approved as a 40B. If we can get him to agree to what we're working at, it'll go down to about 37, I believe. And there'll be for sale condos, I believe.
And there'd be a commercial component there, too.
And a commercial component as opposed to 57 rental units with not a lot of parking. So hopefully, we've put a lot of time, we've put a lot of effort. You have as well. Hopefully we can get them to agree, if we can get it approved at the legislature.
Well, yeah, and you're both right. There's a lot of things here that still need to happen. I've had several conversations with Jerry Connolly. He has a copy of the legislation, so we do have an open line of communication with the Connollys. And you're right. And the next item on our agenda is 131 Elliott Street, the 40B filing. So we'll get to that in a moment. But this is the first step in a process that, I guess, how do we say it? I mean, I think all of us are motivated by what's in the best interest of the town and what's the highest and best use of this property. Is it combining it with the town-owned parcel and the 1,200 square foot parcel to go back to the mixed-use plan, which is what had been on the table for a long period of time, for a number of years before the planning board and the warrant committee before that and town meeting. So it's hopefully this is the first step in trying to get something that might be the best long-term, something that's in the best long-term interest of the town.
That's the key. Yeah.
That's the key.
Yeah.
And I think something that would be beneficial to the developer as well as beneficial to the town and the neighborhood in particular, and the business district. It is a business area that's, I guess fair to say it's booming with Steel and Rye and with the new, all the MassWorks money that's down there. It's an area that's seen a lot of revitalization. And this would be this is sort of like the anchor tenant down there, to use that term. But
and it is a gateway to the town as well.
It is.
And you need an attractive building there.
Mm-hmm.
And
Absolutely.
I believe an attractive building should have some commercial component. And I think it's a great investment that we're offering by giving up the town-owned portion to the developer. We could go the opposite route and just put it out to bid and have anybody bid on it and have an unattractive building on that corner. But I think the developer who owns Elliott Street is probably the right guy to acquire the town-owned portion and to develop the 37 units if he so desires. I mean, he has the support now of us, and he has the support of the planning board, we believe, at least some members of the planning board. And this could be a win-win for everybody.
hopefully we get to something that's a win-win for everybody. I agree. So hopefully, so a lot of steps still to cross here, but we'll keep, as our meetings continue, we'll keep people updated on where the legislation is at.
Right.
So then moving on to number 17, which is 131 Elliott Street.
I'm sorry, you need to
Oh,
vote.
Oh, okay, we're
Proposed
going to
motion.
vote to ratify our vote, which was an executive session because,
So I'll move to ratify the vote of the Board of Selectmen in executive session on July 7, 2014, to authorize filing with the governors a request to file a petition for special legislation authorizing acquisition of approximately 1,220 square feet of land adjoining the town-owned land at 0 Central Avenue, and authorizing the sale of that property and the property at 0 Central Avenue to the then owner of the property at
friendly amendment 131 Elliott Street.
131 Elliott, correct.
I'll second that motion.
Okay. Any discussion? Then all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Unanimous. Okay, so then moving on to number 17, 131 Elliott Street, just will report that there is a hearing coming up this Thursday evening by the Board of Appeals. I believe it's at 7:30?
Yes.
Okay.
Downstairs in the blue.
In the Carol Blute Conference Room. So it's the initial hearing. We understand that it's going to be an organizational meeting, that they may allow the Connollys to begin giving their presentation, I think probably depending on timing or where they're at with the organizational portion of the meeting. But that's our understanding, is that it's organizational and that there'll be some subsequent meetings and that they will give the all town boards and anyone from the town, whether it's a department head or a committee or a board that's requested an opportunity to speak, there will be a chance to speak at future meetings. We filed a copy. The deadline for the town boards to file comments was last Friday morning at 10 o'clock. So we filed a copy of our letter to Mass Housing, which was our comment letter on the 40B from late April. We filed a copy of that with the zoning board and with a cover letter that just reiterated, it was a short cover letter, just reiterated a couple of points about that we think generally affordable housing is appropriate for the area, but that the property itself, the density, the traffic, and other issues that are addressed in our letter are something that would need to be addressed by the Zoning Board of Appeals. And in fact, that's what the MHP letter had said anyway, that, that all of the issues that we highlighted should be addressed during the zoning board process. Now, I guess the question for us is, we've had some residents ask whether we'll be attending this meeting of the zoning board. We're not expecting to speak at this meeting because we've asked for, and we've been told in advance, even if we don't ask for it, we'll be given an opportunity at a future meeting to speak. We just formally, in our letter, asked for permission to speak on behalf of boards that we appoint, such as the Conservation Commission, the Revitalization Committee, various town department heads, including Bill, including the building commissioner, the police chief, different people to address certain issues. I guess we should just talk about, are any of us planning to go to the zoning board meeting on Thursday night?
When is it?
This Thursday.
This Thursday.
I won't be around, so.
I could, but I don't think there's anything to say at this point.
It's also televised.
Yeah, it'll be taped, so we'll be able to watch.
Yeah, we'll be watching at home.
Tape. I may go to it. I'm scheduled to be out of town, but I may be here and go to it. But in any event, Bill Clark and Anne Marie are planning to be there.
How are we doing, just out of curiosity, in terms of trying to get an information flow? I mean, obviously, this is getting an information flow out, but in terms of getting something up on the website or?
We're going to, we spoke with IT the end of last week, and we're going to set up a meeting to sit with IT and with Bill and with Joe Prondak and figure out the best way on the website where to locate it and how to format it. And so we haven't scheduled the actual date of the meeting, but we've had preliminary discussions with IT.
Okay.
You're talking about the materials themselves?
To give
just to keep the
updates on the
public informed
projects.
of, what's going on.
Beyond the 40B, just the
Well,
demolition and the
Yeah.
other thing. Yeah.
Yep, to keep them
Everything that's going
updated
on with
on,
131 Elliott.
yes, keep them updated on the progress of the demolition, keep them updated on the progress on the
With the
CBA
demolition?
40B.
I couldn't hear you there, Emily.
The demolition.
Yeah.
Just to keep them updated on the progress of what's happening with the Hendry site.
Right. Where are we with the
So-
conservation?
We are scheduled to go to the Conservation Commission August 13th.
Yes.
This is in connection with the demolition.
It's the second
agreement.
Tuesday.
Yes.
Yes.
Because it's important to me anyway that despite the fact that we're going on parallel lines here with the 40B and with the, hopefully if the legislation gets approved with the second proposal that we have, that the demolition proceeds as well.
Absolutely.
You know? That there's no layoff of that. Like, we have an agreement in place and we have to make sure that we stick to it.
That's right.
Concom is August 12th.
And that's
Have a
a
meeting.
joint appearance before the Concom bill?
Supposed to be.
Okay, so anything else on 131 Elliott Street?
My understanding is, I actually spoke to Joe Prondak today, that the Connellys have completely abated their building of contaminants. That's what he said. So that's good news. Whatever they had to abate has been abated
On their side?
on their side, and they're waiting for
Is that roof?
certification.
Is that roof too, or just the inside of the building?
I guess the inside.
Has to be just the inside.
Yeah.
Because the roof would be part of the demolition, right?
Right.
So that's good news.
Yeah, I think we're going down 3 tracks here with the demolition, the 40B, the
Yes.
legislation, so,
Right, well, it all has to do it.
yeah.
Our demolition, the invitation to bid was ready July 1st. It's due August 7th at 4:30 to the Selectman's office. It was posted in the Central Register July 16th. It was in the Patriot Ledger tonight, regional newspaper. The packets are available in the Selectman's office. The scope of work is on the town's website. It's on the front page. It's also leads you further into the, to explain what the project is. And a packet is required because there's so many forms that have to be filled out. And that thing is about 1.5 inches, 2 inches thick. It's a big document. As of 3 o'clock today, there's only one company that signed up, but several have shown interest in coming, but only one is signed for the packet so far.
So we should expect a few bids,
I would expect a
your
couple.
opinion, yeah.
I mean, last time we had 3 or 4. I would expect similar numbers.
Okay, then anything else on 131 Elliott? Okay. Town Administrators Report.
Yes, Madam Chair. I just wanted to report to the board that the town will hold the second community meeting on the East Milton Design Project. It's scheduled for Thursday, August 7th at 7 p.m. at the Council on Aging.
And this is the 25%
This
stage.
Is it the 25% or is it the meeting before the 25%?
This is pre-25%.
Pre-25%.
Okay.
This is to get public comment into what will be put into the 25% application. I mean, there was a lot of discussion on should we, shouldn't we have the slip lane. They'll give the numbers, they'll give the...
We're going to have 2 models.
Yeah, they have a software model that will show that they can show the trucks coming through, they can show the amount of traffic that it takes to come through. They can do it with all the traffic counts. They build the traffic count numbers into the model, and you can actually watch it in real time come around and see if it works.
Okay, so again, August 7th at
7
at p.m.
August
Council
7th
on
at
Aging.
7 p.m.
at the
Council on
Council on
Aging.
Aging. Okay, good. Anything else under that?
That's it.
Then under the Chair's report, I just wanted to mention, we are going to schedule, we're actually in the process of scheduling a site walk for the wharf area with the park commissioners, our board, the historical commission, some others, to look at, to explore the area, to look around, mainly to try to go through the yacht club, because we need to eventually go out for an RFP for the yacht club lease, but also to see what we can, see if there's any options regarding the Swift Hat building. So that would be part of it as well, the whole area, the Swift Hat building, the yacht club. We'll get a group of people. It'll be a public walk, obviously, because there'll be several boards who have been invited. We're trying to get a date that works for everybody, or at least we probably can't get a date that works for everyone, given the vacations, but for as many people as possible, hopefully within the next couple of weeks. So we'll...
Just, I'll be gone, I'm gone until the 8th of August. And I'd love to walk it, so if you could make it after that, I'd appreciate it.
Okay, I know Tricia was looking at the 2 weeks leading up to that.
Leading up. We can speak with her.
We'll
You come back on the 8th, Dennis?
Come back on the 7th at night.
On the 7th, okay.
Yeah.
So you're available August
next
8th
day.
and on?
Yep.
Okay.
At this time of year, it's possible we may have, members of the Historical Commission or our board of the Park Commissioners who can't make it, but we'll see if we can get a date that works for as many people as possible. Okay, that's really all I had, was just to report that will be scheduled. Next, citizen speak response. Nothing for tonight. Next meeting agenda items. Our next meeting is on August 12th. We do have the chair of the Government Study Committee, Rick Neely, will be in to give us an update on what that committee's doing that night. I think it's shaping up to be a pretty full agenda.
It's already a pretty full agenda, yes, Madam Chair. You also have Steve Morish coming in that evening to talk about the fire space needs study.
Okay.
I was wondering if we could, I'm not sure where you could talk about the Swift Hat building. I'm not sure if you're getting these emails from this this girl.
And it's
Some
an interesting
great
proposal.
ideas,
Yeah.
some great proposals.
There is a proposal by a person that, and she's reaching out to all of us individually. I've been
Right.
trying to go back and forth with her to set up a phone call, and
I'm gonna sit down
you're
with
going to
her
meet with
tomorrow.
her.
Oh, you are?
So there is.
Just to see what her idea is, but
Yeah.
it's a fascinating idea. I don't know how feasible it is, but it's
I think it's a great proposal, yeah.
I mean, some of the ideas that have been floated just among different groups for the Swift Hat building potentially might be, is there some way that the high school crew team might be able to make some use of that building? Is there a way to have a coffee shop down there? Obviously, there'd need to be a private vendor who would be willing to make an investment in it, but this sounds like a potential opportunity. The question is whether we can, is reuse of that building and we've lost some important historical town buildings, so if there's a way that we can save this one, that worth looking into anyway.
Yeah.
Madam Chair, would you like that discussion after we do the site walk on your agenda?
I think so.
Okay.
That would,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay.
One thing that we probably should talk about sooner rather than later, and Brian Joyce touched on it tonight, was when he mentioned that some state funding for the injured firefighter. We have, we have authorization now from the state for it to have an override election regarding the medical expenses, and that's something that we're going to have to consider when we would schedule that election. And obviously, there has to be a lot of information to given out to the community about what this would involve. It's not a typical override; it's a special kind of override.
I think it probably should go on the November ballot.
We have that scheduled to be on your August 12th agenda.
Okay, if you did,
for discussion.
All right, I was going to suggest we put it on for that night too, sooner rather than later, so that we can talk about what our plans should be. But that's the question: November or next April. And our warrant committee was looking for an operating override last year. The question would be, would they go on separate ballots? Would they, we obviously need to talk with the warrant committee about this as well, and some other people. But that's one option, is the November ballot for the firefighter override. Any other next meeting or agenda items we need to add?
Wasn't the one I brought up to you, and I forget what it was, the other one, but I can't remember what it was right now.
I have a sign for you. Easy. Milton
Yeah, what?
Hospital. I have a sign that would like to get on the
Last
12th.
meeting?
It's a
For the hospital?
Unlit sign
How
on
come
the
you
wall.
Okay,
The
I'll be
warrants.
recused on that one. I'm still on the
Said to
hospital
get
board.
something on it. It was right now.
All right, well, we can
send you an email.
add it after
Yeah, just
the
send me an
meeting.
email.
Yeah.
I'll look
Okay,
at
then
it.
if nothing else, then I will move that we enter executive session to discuss the purchase, exchange, lease, or value of real property, 0 Central Avenue, believing that having this discussion in open session would have a detrimental effect on the bargaining position of the body, and to return to open session to adjourn.
Second.
Yes.
All in favor?
Yes.
Myself, yes. Okay, thank you. We're in executive session.